Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the La Plata Electric Association April board meeting. As we've done in the past, if everybody could take a moment and stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we're going to start with a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved by Rachel.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you for Tim. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, put your hand up, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstained? Okay, the agenda is set. We'll now open up for member comments.
John, do you want me to read the
Please do.
comments statement?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. The La Plata Electric Association Board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board asks that each participant's comment pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during the public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing. Comments from the public will be directed at the entire board and not to any individual director. No personal attacks shall be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our policies and procedures on public comment and filing complaints are available on the cooperative website. Thank you.
Terrific. Anybody put their hand up for a public comment?
Ask again, John. Somebody just joined.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody who'd like to speak on a public comment? Okay. Easy enough. All right, let's go ahead and close public comments. And we'll move to the consent board items. As always, if anybody would like to pick one of these off, any of these items off of the consent board items for individual approval, could please let us know now. Rick Kohler, go ahead.
So I would like to pull off the capital credit payments to estates. Then what I'll do is make a motion to approve the other items, but also add one word to the board minutes. And that one word can be found on page 4 of 123 in the PowerPoint, and also page 3 of 4 of the minutes. About halfway down the page underneath, there's motion there, and then the paragraph after that, the second line, excuse me, says, because of a possible conflict with his role as a tri-state board representative, but planned to rejoin the executive, just to add the word "to" between planned and rejoin. That will be my motion to approve the other items, but pull the capital credits.
Okay, so capital credits is out, no question. Can I get a second to approve the consent board items with the modification as described? Dan Huntington, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstained? Terrific. The consent board items are approved. Let's go ahead and deal with the capital credit payments to estates as a separate item, as a standalone item. So we need a motion to approve that.
So moved by Kohler.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. So any discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Kohler.
Sorry, Carla, before
Yeah,
you
I know.
go, Graham, I believe this is somewhat confidential. Is this something we can discuss in open session?
I think that's a good point. If you'll notice at the top of that in red, it's identified as confidential. So I don't know exactly what Kohler is planning to speak on, but probably.
I won't use names because I know it is confidential. So if we look at, I'm going to start from the bottom, 10 days up. What we have there is a business name instead of an individual. And businesses don't have estates. So just need clarification or correction, whatever that might be.
Yeah,
That's the issue
I very well, let me 100% clarify, but I believe it's an individual DBA. But let me clarify that, Kohler, and perhaps we can, at the beginning of the executive session, I'll give you all the details, and then we can perhaps get that passed. Does that sound reasonable?
It does, but even individual DBA, I don't think qualifies for an estate refund. And if it does, then maybe what we should do is consider putting an asterisk there with an explanation towards the bottom. So if we revisit this in a few months or something, we have an idea what it is, because I haven't seen the business before and I don't think it qualifies. But
That's
I
a
could
really
do
good point.
clarification on that.
Okay, so maybe give Carl and Graham an hour. Let's take that into executive session so we can talk about it without stumbling over the specifics, and give Carl and Graham an hour or two to see if they can run down a specific item that allow us to pass the whole thing in mass, or otherwise we'll have to deal with it as an individual correction. Sound fair? And we'll do that in executive session in a couple hours. Does that sound fair?
Thank you. Yes.
Terrific. Okay, to be continued on that item. All right, so CEO and staff reports. Let's go ahead and hand the mic to Jessica.
Okay, good morning. I will share my screen. Drew, it's not letting me share again, so do you mind sharing it?
Yep, can do. Everybody see
Okay.
that?
Can you make it a little bigger? Great. All right. This is our full leadership team. So as I mentioned, we're welcoming Elizabeth Howe. I think this is her first board meeting. So we are fully staffed on the leadership level. So we're pretty excited about that. Okay, Drew? I'm going to have Jerry explain the SAFE number. So that's one that we're watching. And then Carl, during his finance presentation, will go over equity, and then beneficial electric sales are just a little bit down, but that often is more behavioral from members. So we continue to work on educating contractors and members about BE opportunities and looking for grant opportunities on that. Okay, Jerry, do you want to explain the SAFE number, please?
The high SAFE number for the month was due to a brand new piece of equipment that was supposed to be insulated, and it was not. And anytime that moisture would enter the atmosphere, it would track and trip out the circuit. It was a trip and reclose multiple times throughout the storms that we had. We call it chasing ghosts because it will clear itself once it arcs over to a ground source. It dries the moisture out enough where the circuit will hold, and then it will get wet again, trip out again. It took our guys a very long time to find it. It actually took 3 storms, and it took one person being in the right spot at the right time to actually see the arc flash. Once we got that piece of equipment changed out, We sent it back to the manufacturer, and they are looking into what caused it to fail.
Kirsten, do you have a question on that one?
Just quick, is the piece of equipment one of a class of equipment that we have a lot of, and this is just one that happened to come in bad? Or is this a new thing and we only had one of it and it's bad?
No, they're actually hot arms. So when we are reconductoring a circuit or a section of line, we place these temporary fiberglass arms on the cross arms, the existing cross arms, and we'll put the energized lines in them to create space to pull in new wire. This one, we don't know if it got dropped in transit, had a hairline fracture is what we're guessing. That's naked to the or invisible to the naked eye. That's our guess, but we won't know for sure until we get a report back from the company.
Okay, we can keep going if there's no other questions on this one. Okay, so here's some March highlights. We are getting the crews back together in safety meetings. So this is a picture of the Pagosa and Durango crews, really fun. They all like to cross their arms, I've decided, and wear gray sweatshirts. So, but it was really good to see them.
And Levi's.
We're really excited. 0 accidents and incidents in March. And as you can see, we'll probably start taking off the COVID check mark because that is now 0 for several months. Okay, keep going. This is another picture of the crews in the training room. Kirsten, did you have a question?
I need to go back to my question with Jerry. It came to me as we went to the next slide. So Jerry, you said this was really hard to hunt down. And I know we have all sorts of things in the system to help us hunt down where issues are and to isolate things. Why was this so hard to isolate? What makes this different from other things that we try to isolate?
So it looked at the OCRs. The OCRs, they don't go to lockout until 4 operations. And so it would operate one time and blink everybody's lights. It would dry it out. It would clear the fault, re-energize the circuit. And then once it got wet enough, it would do it again. And so it was just a time frame that it was long enough where it wasn't isolating it for us. And so somebody just had to be at that structure at the right time. And that's how we ended up finding it.
So if it had just plain old failed, we would be able to tell where it was failed. But because
Correct.
It was in the butt, we couldn't tell where it was.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, good questions. It's pretty frustrating to the guys as well. On this slide, I just wanted to point out, we had brought up that we're doing drone inspections. So those are continuing, and we're pretty excited about it because we've been able to see several areas that need immediate attention. So Kirsten, to your point, not that this would have found that potentially, I mean, Jerry would know more, but we are starting to find areas of that need immediate attention and repair that we would have never seen because they're out in kind of more remote areas and difficult to get to. So we're excited about that. Caller, did you have a question?
I do on the engineering analytics. Is this a good time to ask?
Yeah, we may have to punt it if we can't answer it just because Dan's not on the call, but definitely we'll try to answer that one.
It's a pretty simple question. And the only what I wanted to ask is, do we have issues that we need these enhancements? Or is this just kind of a bonus that they're doing to make things better than what they already are?
Typically, what Tantalus and KMU are doing is they're just finding opportunities. So their technologies are getting better and better and better. So for this one, I do know that it was just additional items that their engineers have been working on to provide more operability for this equipment.
Thank you.
Mhm. Joe?
Yeah, just on two questions, one on UAV and one on engineering. The UAV, is it poles? What sort of things are you seeing from the drone photos or video, whatever?
Yeah, good question. Jerry, do you want to answer that one?
The major problems that we found were that you could not see from the ground. We found many floating phases. They looked like they were tied into the insulators, but they actually were not. The aerial view gave us a very good shot of that. And then we also found some failing epoxylators and their insulators on dead end poles. We found 12 of them that we saved one. They more or less melted. They failed and the current melted them to the point where I believe if we wouldn't have caught them before these storms, they would have created some major outages.
And you said floating phases, basically that's wires not attached or?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, the consultants, Tantalos and Camus, whatever, are they hardware suppliers or software or what are they?
Yeah, Tantalus is our smart meters. So we've had that for maybe a decade or more. CAMU is that group that Dan reported on probably last year, where they're coming in and doing more data analytics. So they're coming in and tying our whole system together with all the data so that we can have a better picture of what's happening on the system. So for example, they just reported to us one of their technologies that they're trying to perfect is identifying transformers that are overloaded. So we wouldn't know that. But now with the data aggregation that they're using from Tantalus, which are the smart meters, they're able to get us a better picture of what's happening out on the grid. Wow. So it's really wonderful predictive information. Now, I believe Dominic May, he came last year and gave a briefing to the board. He's going to be coming back to do another update to the board probably late this summer or early fall.
Thank you.
Yep. Sue?
Thank you. On the UAV drones, do we own and operate those, or are we contracting out to someone else?
Yeah, good question. So we thought about buying it, but the insurance was astronomical. And so we contract out that work. Okay, long term, would it make sense for us to do that, or is it just too cost prohibitive because of insurance? You know, it's a good question. We would, I think, rather purchase it. So that could be in the future. But I think for right now, because the insurance still is too high on that, it's cost prohibitive. But Jerry, I mean, this is something where we would examine every year to see if it made sense.
Yeah, and another thing is the licensing that you have to have. There's some pretty major licensing requirements as well.
Yeah, it's actually FAA licensing. Yep. Okay, well, thank you so much. Yep. Okay, Drew, next slide. Okay, just looking at this, again, the beneficial electrification work is really ramping up. There's a lot of folks in our community asking about this because of all the federal grant money coming down the pipe. And so, so we are really trying to pay attention to what's going on, working with our local community, even federal legislators on making sure we understand what type of money is in the infrastructure package so that we can apply for those grants. So we're staying on top of that. Hillary and her team did a fantastic job on Women's History Month. I'm not sure if folks saw, but they posted pretty much on a daily basis. I believe Hillary just updates on the Women's History Month. So it was nice to have that. Holly, did you have a question?
Just curious if 11,300 impressions is a lot on a social media campaign.
Hillary, do you want to answer that? No. I will get back to you. Oh, there she is. Oh, we can't hear you. She will I believe it is. So I'll get you that answer, Holly. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I was just kind of curious on that. Also, I was curious, how are you contacting area home builders? How are you getting a hold of those groups in order to talk about the future of all electric installations?
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry about that. On your first question, Holly, yes, that's a good figure. It's definitely not the highest figure we've had from any of our campaigns. So for example, this month is Line Worker Appreciation Month, and we're gonna have a lot more impressions for this campaign. The pictures of the linemen are always very popular. But I would say it was nothing to sneeze at. So it was a good sort of medium-sized campaign. As far as how we're reaching out, we have been pretty active in the Home Builders Association of Southwest Colorado. Also, now that events are starting to happen again, our energy management folks are out there at the Green Business Roundtables, at the Eggs and Things, at the chamber events. And so we're getting more known. And I think, there's two developments right now in the Durango area that are looking to go all electric who reached out to us because they were just interested in knowing what we might be able to provide to them in their effort to go all electric. So a bit of a combination of proactive and reactive.
Great, thank you for that. Because I had noticed, because I do keep an eye out, that there was some contacts mentioned specifically within District 1, the Pagosa Golf Course and the Water District. So I do want to thank you for that. Also, I know I have mentioned in the past relationship building. I think it's really ultra important. And right now in Pagosa Springs, I'm not a town elector, so I did not have any part of this, but the very first female mayor of Pagosa Springs was elected and sworn in this week. So we've got kind of a new changing of the guard. So I'm asking for some consideration in some of that stellar relationship building to come on over to District 1, and I can definitely help facilitate some meetings with some of the building groups and some of those groups if you are interested. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, we'll definitely take you up on that. Appreciate that. Okay, Rachel.
Yeah, I was just pinging back a little bit. You mentioned in talking about beneficial electrification, getting together with some of the ARPA funds coming down, and just curious if there's a parallel effort going on organizing around some of the broadband. And I know there's kind of a hole in our region around coordinating with Miriam's departure. So just any updates on that?
Yeah, very timely, in fact. So Dan is heavily involved in a group that's coordinating right now in Pagosa. And it's actually fiber over there. And I just received an email this morning, so I can't pull it up right now, but we are going through the process of doing a joint application to get DOLA funds with them. So it's a consortium, and it's actually working with District 9. And then we are plugged in. There is, even though Miriam is gone, District 9 is organizing regional meetings. So the next one is, I believe, tomorrow. And it's Southwest Colorado, like a broadband committee, and he will be there. So yeah, we are all in and working as much as we can on these grants, and we are going to be an applicant with a group of Pagosa, and I believe it's Bayfield, on getting those DOLA grant money. And Dan's actually been working with some of the other entities federally just to stay in the know in regards to when is this money going to be issued, and what does it look like for the grant process?
Awesome. Thanks for the update. I don't know if what other folks think and how much of a burden this would be on staff, but would it be possible to just include a little update on broadband activities in our packets in the future, even if it's nothing to report, just placeholder? Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. I think that's a good idea. Thank you. Okay, Joe.
Yeah, just an FYI on the beneficial electrification. I resigned from the City Planning Commission last month, but for the last 6 months, we've had, 4 or 5 pretty big developments come through approved that were they're going, I always ask, are you all electric or what? And all of them are going all electric. So it's, I think everyone's doing that now. So anyway.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, that's good news for us. We actually, City of Durango transportation and sustainability person, Marty Poole, if anybody remembers him, was at our office yesterday meeting with Dan and staff to talk about this. So it's definitely at the top of people's minds. Ted?
Yeah, same topic. It's just kind of a feel-good story from the board level. My neighbor is a builder, and he asked me about the possibility of doing some sort of demonstration project on a development that he's putting together. What can we do for beneficial electrification? And I got him in touch with Dan and Jessica, and I think his project is going to go all electric. So it's one that a year ago would not have gone that way, and this year is likely to go that way. So it bodes well for the direction that we're moving. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate those connections too, Ted. So thank you. Okay, Drew. All right, wanted to bring up the LPEA innovative leader. So this is pretty exciting. Where Dan went to the NRECA's Power Exchange and Tech Advantage conference, and he was often pulled aside to ask about our innovation. So he was really excited. And then from then, we continue to get phone calls and requests on how we're doing both the partial and how we're doing a lot of our innovation work with CAMU and tying our system together to have a better idea of what's going on with our smart meter data. So it's pretty exciting. And Dan and his staff and others really are just really, their morale is really high because folks are really seeking them out for their innovation. So that's exciting. Tim?
Yeah, you meant it's mentioning peer presentations here. I don't know if any of those are worth reviewing or if they're available somewhere, but I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, he didn't present, so I'll have to ask him what he's asking, what he's mentioning in that regard. It may be the, I'll ask him with the peer one.
Yeah, I mean, if there's something in there that is interesting and it could be put on Google Drive for looking at, might be interesting. Thanks.
Great, will do. Okay, Sue?
On the MDSC growth for Carl, can you refresh our memory on what that stands for everyone, please?
Sure. That's modified debt service coverage. It means how many times could you pay your debt servicing payments using your cash flow in.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Holly.
Mine is just an observation. Over the last 3 years in my involvement as a board director, I have repeatedly seen how LPEA is ahead of the pack in so many different ways and so many different indicators. So I just want to say kudos to the entire team for, having the capacity and the courage to look at being innovative and leading. And it really shows in a whole bunch of different ways. And so, I have seen with my own eyes and my own observation that, we are ahead of the pack in a lot of ways. And I'm really grateful. And Dan's not here, but congratulations, Dan, for his new title. And welcome to Miss Howe. When I first saw your presentation, I'm like, who's that lady in the middle? And it took me a couple of seconds to remember, but welcome.
Thanks, Holly. Okay, next slide, please. And then there's the appendix with Dalton climbing the pole. So any questions on anything else? Joe?
Yeah, in the appendix executive report, you mentioned the IBEW contract negotiations. I'm assuming we'll be getting some sort of a update or explanation of how that's going in executive session or?
Yeah, because these are they're legal settlements. There's not much I can talk about, except that we're still in negotiations. So those should hopefully wrap up this week.
Okay, but I mean, we're the ones who, approve the budget and stuff. So I'm assuming we can get something in executive session on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we're finished with this settlement, we'll be able to give an update in executive session. That's correct.
Okay.
But we don't have any decisions at this point. Okay, Kohler?
Under the keep the lights on and the targets, there's one, 100% of LPEA's critical infrastructure is actively monitored. Can you give us an update of where we are now compared to the 100%? Kind of a status?
Yeah, Jerry, I don't know if you can give that.
I can speak to it unless you want to go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, critical. Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
So this would be when we say actively monitoring, we're talking about cameras at the substations, door sensors, if a door is opened unexpectedly, that sort of thing. We've got about a quarter of them done. So we're tracking well to have them all monitored, but it requires getting communication out to all those substations is a big part of it.
So this is completely separate from SAIDI and all these other things that we're doing.
Yeah, this is from a security perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Holly?
Thank you. I just wanted to hold up your, on page 35, the electric safety demo webpage is really cool. I went and I checked it out, and it's now, other organizations can sign up for safety demonstrations really easily on that webpage. And I just want to say kudos for that too. Thank you.
Yes, and that's where Elizabeth is working really hard as per the safety department to create a more robust training opportunity in regards to electrical safety, in particular for our first responders, right? So thank you.
Hey, if I could just jump in and remind everybody, if you're specifically referencing a document in our agenda, could you please cite the page number you're looking at so we can all jump to it quickly? Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, page 30. And the electric rates are lower than 70% of our Colorado cooperative peers. I think there's a new KRTA report out, and I'm just curious if we've looked at where we are in that based on that. And if not now, maybe at some point we could, just to see where we're standing.
Tim, the new KRTA report will come out in July.
Okay.
It's after everyone's filed their Form 7, and the deadline for that is the end of April.
All right, so maybe in August we would be able to.
Yeah, I think that's good timing. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, if there are no more questions, back to you, John.
Okay, sounds great. So it is finance report time. So Carl, you want to go ahead and lead us through that, please?
Sorry, John. Yes. Let me bring that up. We were just tracking down the estate, so pardon my hesitation there. Graham, are we good just to answer that now before I jump into this, or should we wait?
Let me answer your last email real quick, and then I'll let you kind of go through this.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, March, so the end of Q1. We've got lots of nice ticks, or an orange one. But in terms of margins, cash, long-term debt, and our ratios, everything is looking rosy compared to the approved financial goals. We had 2 months of cash being under the 16% in January and February, but we're back to 18% at the end of March. This was something we discussed in some depth at the Finance and Audit Committee when we went through the goals, but we'll get to that when Bob and I report out on that, because it's likely that we'll be under again in April because there's a big debt payment at the end of the month. So overall, our margins were above budget. The driver there was in sales, increased kilowatt hour sales in all of our main categories, that being residential, commercial, and industrial. There was also, once again, a very high load factor and a low number for line loss in March. So there was in cost of power, we actually incurred a $200,000 surcharge from Tri-State, which relates to our self-generation. We went over 5%. The self-generation is a combination of, a number of projects and rooftop solar, those kind of things. And if we go over the 5% that we're mandated, then we have to pay a surcharge, which was put on our energy bill in March. But we didn't really feel much of the effect of that because of the increased sales and because of that high load factor and the very low line loss in March. Dan's not here to give you a proper answer, but I know both of those are really driven by industrial sales being higher than we had forecast. So costs were pretty much where we had budgeted. There was a bit of up and a bit of down. It wasn't all, exactly as we said it would be. Jerry's already talked about, Jessica talked about, and Jerry chimed in on the drone. That was an expense that we actually had for budgeted later in the year, but I know we wanted to get it done as soon as we could. We just didn't expect them to be available when they were. And we had some legal fees budgeted that we didn't spend. So there's some other ups and downs, but that's those two really kind of offset each other, and we get to an operating expense number that is actually slightly higher than we budgeted. Let me remind myself of that exact number, $26,000. So, where we saw in Q1 last year, we were quite a long way under on our expenses. We are still somewhat under this year, but we are seeing far more of a normal expense profile. The savings really are mainly in that legal and professional category. So with this being the end of the quarter, we look at how are we doing against budget slide. And you can see that we're around $800,000 over on our operating margins thus far. And the majority of that does come from the top line of revenue less cost of power. We do have, as I mentioned, we do have some savings on expenses, mainly in the administrative and general category, and a lot of that is legal and professional fees. Also travel and training. We have budgeted more than we did last year as anticipating a catch up, but just not a huge amount has happened so far, although Jessica can speak to this as well as I'm seeing more requests coming in, so I think this will beef up as the year goes on. So some highlights. As I mentioned, operating costs slightly above forecast, $26,000 on 2 million. I mean, that's 1% ish. Labor costs, we're doing a really good job of budgeting those. We're pretty much identical to forecast, and that is also, that's in both the expensed portion as well as the capitalized portion. Our delinquent accounts continue to be very, very low indeed. 0.03% of our total book of receivables. For those of you who've run for-profit businesses, I think you'd kill for that number. Electric sales about 3% above forecast in terms of kilowatt hours. We mentioned the higher gross margins, and operating margins $331,000 over forecast. You can see that's driven entirely really by gross margin, sales less cost of power. So overall, I think a pretty good first quarter to the year. We are exceeding our expectations in sales. I think that's mainly due to just unseasonably cold. Looks like a beautiful day today, so maybe Q2 will not be so strong in terms of sales. We certainly don't anticipate that. In fact, we budget and we expect to make an operating loss in Q2. So I will leave it there, and any questions? I see Tim and Rachel, but I don't know who was first.
Rachel was first. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thanks. I'm sorry my video's off. I'm having weird internet stuff today. Thanks, Carl, and great job. One quick question, just to kind of understand the driver behind that excess self-generation. Yeah, I guess is that, I know we were at some point thinking we were kind of edging up to that 5% based on some of our additional rooftop, what the rooftop was selling back into the grid. But then we have our big account that generates for that. So I'm just curious how we tipped over and if that's anticipated to continue in the future. I know it's perhaps not as relevant anymore.
So I know I would defer to Dan on that one. Rooftop solar was definitely a factor, not the only one, but it's definitely a factor. Some of where we get energy from, and Graham, I'm not sure on the confidentiality of this. I think I'm okay to talk about these, am I not?
Sorry, I was looking at a different question. Could you repeat what you're? Thank you for asking me, though.
The self-generation contracts we have with the waste heat and the hydro project, we can discuss that in open session, I believe.
Not the pricing.
Yeah, no, I think
that's all confidential in the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Rachel, if you don't mind, we'll handle that by email. Does that work for you?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, guys.
Tim.
Thanks, Carl. Just as an aside to Rachel's question, we did discuss some of this in the Finance and Audit Committee where Dan was present. In that session, he did mention names publicly, but I'll defer to Graham. And he indicated that most of that overage was due to that one large self-generation. Not really, not so much overage of rooftop solar. My question is around that penalty, as it's called, for exceeding that. Is it correct to say that that's a true up from 2021?
Yes, it is. That is correct. Yeah.
So we exceed in 2021 or per year, and then the following year we see the result of that.
Correct. This happened last year as well.
So it seems like that's something that we might want to keep an eye on as we go through budget.
Yes, very much so.
So for 2023, we might have to consider that. Although I think also Dan mentioned that we bump against that 5% or go over it, partly because our load has shrunk, especially during the pandemic effect, right?
Mhm.
So it's probably tricky to keep track of, but I think some reserve for something like that as we've encountered it and go through budgeting is probably in order. So maybe
No, I
keep
would
that in mind
agree.
as we get there.
As we've had it for 2 years in a row, I think we should take the prudent approach and budget for it for 2023.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I'll just add, Tim, that's a great point to bring up, is that with these electrification buildings that Joe mentioned, we're hoping that that will definitely increase the load so that it does reduce the amount of money that we're going to have to pay back Tri-State. So all these things are connected in some way, because it does increase load, but definitely not as much as what we lost.
Right. But and I don't know if this is the right spot to do it, but if I look at my favorite 2 pages that Monica probably curses me every time she puts these together. But
She curses me, Tim, don't worry.
You know, some of those loads are still declining, I think, especially in residential. Year on year, between March, I'm on page 57. If you look at residential between March year to date 2021 and 2022, we actually sold less kilowatt hours in 2022 than 2021. So, you know, while we are making these efforts and increasing load, hopefully through BE, beneficial electrification, the numbers show that we're still seeing a declining load. So I think we have to consider that carefully in the budgeting. So anyway, thank you, Monica. I appreciate that chart so much.
I'll pass that on to her. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Joe.
Page 52, statement of operations.
Yep.
Just a question and a comment. Let me see, it's under distributed expense, maintenance, increase, fire mitigation. So that's where our fire mitigation expenditures go under maintenance. Is that correct?
Some, and that's where the drone went, Joe. So that's why that's higher.
Okay.
But some of it goes into operations as well, I think, Jerry, but the majority would be maintenance.
Okay. And so where it says increase fire mitigation, 139,000, is that just the drone, or was that other things too?
The drone is around 95, I believe, Jerry. And then, yeah, there's some other stuff there with a lot of it is where labor is directed. So that would be the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. And does the drone give us, fire mitigation or fire prevention information too, Jerry?
It does. The photos that they take 4 photos, 2 of the pole and then 2 of the right of way in either direction of that pole. And we've actually located some areas where there's some danger trees that we never would have seen until they fell.
Yeah, I just like to, I like to see increased fire mitigation spending, and we're headed for another real dry summer. So I don't have any issue with more spending on that, because it's
absolutely
it'd be a crazy summer. So thanks.
Carl Kohler has a question.
Sorry, I was looking at that estate again. I apologize, Carla. Please go ahead.
No problem. On page 58 and 123, the performance statistics page, I like these 2 pages, but on the very bottom of that one, it does have the statistics and it shows the miles of transmission and distribution. Is there any possibility that we could also add there the miles of fiber that's added and how it compares to what it was in the past, like what you do with the other things?
I would think so. I will get with Dan to just make sure that that's not a difficult thing to do, but I would assume it's not.
Thank you.
Kirsten.
Page 53, please. The transmission expense line, as we look at it through the year, it changes through the year, even though our infrastructure doesn't change through the year. So is this all our transmission demand costs that we get from Tri-State?
No, transmission demand will always sit in cost of purchase power. There's some there's some fluctuations there, and some of it is related to labor, where the guys are charging their time. But we also have some NERC compliance, which kind of comes in fits and starts, and some right of way. So that's why that can sometimes be inconsistent.
So is it consistent year to year? Do we know to expect that normally?
We saw it go up from 20 to 21, and the budget for 22 is for it to be very similar to 21. And I would be very surprised if that didn't happen.
So this is nothing to do with the demand component of our rates. That's up in the purchase power. This
Yes.
is only to do with the work that we do on our transmission that we control,
Yes.
opposed to our distribution that we control. And the transmission that we control is a reminder for all of us.
I would have to defer to Dan or Jerry on that.
Dan would have a better answer than I.
Let me make a note, Kirsten, for her to have Dan reach out to you on that. Rachel.
Yeah, just a clarification. I know you've explained this to us before, and you even do so again in the writing. So on page 48 and 49, on 48 under balance sheet and cash,
yep,
there's a negative balance in the work in progress line, this month's balance sheet, as this is a sum of work in progress, which I get, that's money we have spent on projects that aren't yet live. But what I don't understand is the next part, and contributions in aid of construction. So I tried to understand what that all means by reading it on your glossary of terms, which I love. But can you explain again when it says costs are netted against any member contribution to the project? So when we look at that line item, what is it saying?
So the contribution in aid of construction, when we build some electric infrastructure and it's deemed that we would not have built it if not for a certain customer needing it specifically, then they will actually pay towards that construction. Now you see it on a small level with some residential and small commercial projects, but if you've got something huge like with our largest, member that I won't name, but you know who they are. When they were building stuff in the last 10, 20 years, there was some huge infrastructure that was required, including substations, transmission lines, and they contributed an awful lot of money towards it. So there is a pretty substantial amount of money in that account. And it comes as it kind of offsets what we spend because we are not actually putting any cash out. So it's in electric utility accounting for co-ops, you actually represent that as a negative balance in your fixed assets. So that's what that means. And we're just in a position right now where that balance is higher than the work in progress balance. And we do need to split it out, and you have my personal guarantee in Q2 that will happen.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem, Rachel. So I think, and if Graham, please stop me, but I saw your email and that's very helpful. So I would address the estates so we can get that closed off, if that's okay. So the business that's named, as Kola pointed out, and I appreciate you doing this, and this is something we need to note going forward, is actually owned by the individual who is, I should say, operated rather, by the individual who's the fourth person down on the estate list. And the two accounts were managed by that individual. He paid them, but in our system, we differentiated them by naming one after the business. And we really, in terms of putting it out as an estate, that obviously looks very wrong indeed, because that wouldn't be the case for a business. So we've reviewed the paperwork from the estate, and this is a naming error really that's carried over and is on the estate's application. So we've reviewed the account documentation, and the requested accounts are actually in the name of this individual whose estate made this request. So we would amend the report to reflect the correct name of the estate that held the account, who's the individual on line 4, and ask that the board approve the retirement as amended, if that's okay.
Well, that's exactly what I was looking for, and I thought maybe that might have been the case. So I will make the motion to approve the capital credits to estates as amended.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstained? Okay, thanks for that correction. And thanks for calling that out, Kohler.
Yeah, it's very useful. We will make sure that that does not happen again. Appreciate it, Kola.
Okay. All right. Are you, anything else? Carl? I'm going to take that.
And I'm muted.
There we
Yes,
go.
I'm good, John. I apologize.
Okay, you good?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Okay, so we're at a break right now. You guys want to, we can push on, or we can take the break now.
I would like a little break, if that's okay.
Terrific. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break now. We will see you guys at 10:10. Who wants to come on back? All right, let's go ahead and get started into the board action agenda. This is section 5, starting with the Finance and Audit Committee update.
Okay, I'll start that, and Carl will help me chime in if that's okay, John.
You bet.
Yeah, I didn't write a report, so you aren't missing it in the packet. My daughter got married on Saturday, and I left 1 minute after our meeting ended on Thursday, so I didn't get that done. So I apologize. But also, there wasn't in the same way a lot to report on, other than we had a huge discussion about goals, and rather than, we didn't arrive at a recommended change to the goals. There's several options and several aspects to that we considered in a really robust discussion. And with Carl's help, we'll get some of that same feedback from the board here. And let me comment on 2 of the things we talked about the goals. One was the cash goal, where we currently have that current range. I don't have it in front of me, but where we sometimes dip a little bit below that 16% down to 12 or so. And so there's a lot of debate about whether we're just adjusting the goal to fit the circumstance, or if in fact the range being a little wider is a wise thing, or it's totally the right thing. So with respect to cash, what we talked about really was maybe reframing that goal in terms of how long can you pay your bills if no revenue came in? So, because that's what cash is really there for, is it, as if you didn't receive payment on any bills, how long could you stay afloat? And currently that's about 2 months, but we might reframe that goal as days of cash available to fund operations, and think about it that way. I'll let Carl comment on that in a minute. The second one that we talked quite a bit about was often currently our equity is way above the goal that we've set. So it looks like, oh, we've got too much equity. But in fact, what we're in a good position for is in these 2 years between now and when we do the buy down, we'd like that equity to be higher so that we use that money to pay the buy down. Then our equity is going to drop because we wisely invested that money. So equity goal might be recast as something in the above 50s for the next 2 years, and then it's going to drop into those more of what our goal states now in the mid 40s, something along those lines. So those are two big areas that we've talked about reframing both what the cash represents of days of operating in ability to pay our bills, and equity being higher now is a good thing and maybe an essential thing as we get ready to make the big payment to buy down our contract with Tri-State. And I'll kick it over to Carl and have you add a little and talk about the other goals, of the profit goal, margin goal that we talked about, as well as the others.
Thanks, Bob. I will try and be a little less discombobulated than I was in the finance report. I apologize for that. So yeah, Bob touched on those two. We also had a good discussion about margins. We thought that maybe we should look at having the margin goal being the same as the budget. And I think Tim summarized this really well when he said, do you think the goal should drive the budget or the other way around? And he wanted the goal to really drive the budget, that you should never be budgeting less than your goal. So we're in this position this year where our margin goal is 1.5% of sales, but our budget is around 2.5%. So we could conceivably be well short of our budget, but meet our goal. So I was thinking, well, maybe you have the budget drive the goal, but we talked, well, really, we need this kind of framework of, that let's keep where we're at. So we have this floor. And we also thought in these very, unstable economic times, high inflation, all sorts of global events, we should be, pretty careful about saying, oh, well, let's make it 4% because that's where we are now. Next year might look very different. So I think our conclusion, and Tim and Bob and Kirsten, who were there, please correct me if this wasn't your understanding, is we probably leave that one alone for now. We have this floor that's 1.5 now, it will be 2 next year, then 2.5, then 3. That's probably okay. And maybe we, if we continue to far outstrip that, then we'll take another look. Another thing we thought about was we had kind of informal discussions that would review it every 2 years, but that wasn't memorialized anywhere. So that would probably become part of the policy as well. MDSC and OTIER we report on every month. But those aren't actually goals. Policy 201 does say that we shouldn't set a goal that means we cannot meet our debt covenants. The MDSC is an external debt covenant from CFC right now, and we should leave that alone unless they decide they want to change that, which I have no indication that they wish to do so. So that's all I had on the goals. Bob, did you want to add anything else?
Well, I just wanted to tell folks that we thought we would recap the discussion as we have, and then in May, we'll finalize what our recommendations are.
Yeah.
On goals. And we just invite you now or via email to comment on any of those things you've heard or anything you'd like to know more about or have input in on where those goals might land. So we'll just open to comments if there are any. We'll take that as a resounding endorsement of our brilliant thinking, and we'll come back and finalize that. Oh, Joe has a hand up. Sorry, Joe. I didn't see the hands. Go ahead, Joe.
I can't say I'm I have a really great in-depth understanding of all this, but I'm always kind of amazed. I just don't see any circumstances where we'd ever go 2 months without any income, unless there's a nuclear war or something. So it always seems that's it's just not a possibility. So your idea of renaming it or recasting it, and with our buy down payment coming up, I like that idea. It just doesn't seem necessary to have that sort of a cash reserve, given reality, I guess. So.
And we talked about that. We thankfully have one of the more stable income streams you can have when you're a utility. So, but you still want to have X number of days of cash sitting there for whatever eventuality. So agree on that. And we'll probably talk about that and bring that back in the form of days of cash available.
Kristen
Anything
had a
else,
question,
anyone?
Bob.
I can't see the hands I get on my screen, so.
So, yeah, Carl, I want to give you a chance to use the term ring fence. I have no idea. I don't remember even what, I just have this in my notes, ring fence.
Unfortunately, that was something we talked about in the executive session.
Okay, super, thank you very much.
But
then the second,
I will.
my second note is a little more serious. It is about what we talked about with the margin goal, and I know we said we would leave it the same, but we did want to have, let's see, showing that we were going to be, my notes go kind of flat here. I have that we want to use the financial goals to identify issues, and that they should also be used to drive decisions, so that if the goal is, okay, we're going to have this amount of equity, then we need to make sure that we don't make decisions that go counter to that unless we do it very consciously. But I thought with the margins that we're going to keep it, but then also talk about having a Tim or Bob. Am I just going crazy on my memory of that?
Well, we talked about that we would very much need to revisit in the new business model with new power supply, because margins may increase, and what we would then do with said margins.
So again, that would be revisit on major events. Right?
Yeah, that's all I recall, Kirsten, but there may be something else.
I'm sorry, I don't have the notes on that. Thank you.
So if you have any thoughts or questions, email us. We'll meet again in May. I think our meeting's on the same day as our annual meeting, and then we'll come back with our recommended, firmed up thinking on the goals. So thank you.
So Bob, the other major discussion we had was on unclaimed capital credits, and I was going to run through the presentation that I gave to the FAC. I'm going to say Finance and Audit Committee going forward, just in case my accent distorts what I just said and it's misinterpreted.
Two great people separated by a common language.
That's it. So I did send a memo and some documentation to the full board. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago regarding this topic. Didn't get any responses to that. I'm not going to take that everyone thought it was wonderful, but I'm assuming that everyone kind of followed where we were going. So I'm going to just run through this real quick. So unclaimed capital credits, we're proposing that they be used to support education and promote innovation. So on a very high level, this is our summary. We've got just over $500,000 available this year, with 55% proposed to go to educational grants and 45% proposed to go to promote innovative projects and beneficial electrification. This is an extract from the table that I sent out to you. That you'll recognize this. We've used this every year since a long time before I was around, at LPEA, not born. That was a fair while ago. So we're looking at, with the top lines, these are kind of always going to be there. They're mandated by policy. So we are scholarships round up GED. Those are, and Graham added the actual policies from policy 203, the subsections that refer. So with scholarships, I know one thing we talked about is some students did defer from 2021 and in 2020. You can see there was a low spend in 2020. They didn't want to go to college for it just to be a virtual experience. That's pretty much over now, hopefully for good. And the 83,000 in 21 and 22 does cover all of the scholarships that we are committed to in those years. So it's not just the ones we've awarded. You know, a study obviously takes more than a year. These are ongoing commitments to the scholarship recipients for LPEA. Then we go down to the more discretionary, if you like. We have $95,000 going to the Innovative Projects Fund, $150,000 to promote beneficial electrification in our service territory. And I'll go into more depth on the next slides as to what we're aiming towards with all these. There's, in terms of education, once again, there's a program at Fort Lewis College for native education in the business sphere. Any dollars that go towards that are matched and actually become an endowment. So they'll be able to be used for an awfully long time. So anything we put towards that is multiplied. Then we have, we're looking at STEM grants for La Plata and Archuleta counties, $25,000 to each. There are some preliminary ideas on where those might go. I know Bob and Kirsten had some ideas, and I think Holly was also mentioning this as our District 1 directors to have some input into, you know, there were many requests in Pagosa Springs area and in Archuleta County generally. So that's an overview of where we're proposing that the money go. So I go to education. First of all, as I mentioned, this meets all of our policy requirements. We support the Roundup Foundation. We fund local STEM-based education. We're also supporting an underserved minority population, which goes towards our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. We're looking to fund specific local programs rather than just putting a pool of money out there and hoping for the best. We're actually looking at things that exist now where there is an identified need. And we're also, especially as I mentioned with the endowment part of the Fort Lewis contribution, there are long-term benefits that will go beyond just us giving that money this year. So moving to the promoting innovation. So remember, this is 45% of the $500,000. The education was slightly larger. We've contributed to the Innovative Project Fund twice already through unclaimed capital credits, and it's been a real success. Those funds were used as a source for matching dollars from either locally, the state, the feds. Some projects I can name now, the electric school bus, the Animus View pilot project, and DC fast chargers. Those were all innovative projects supported by our fund. And this kind of funding works much better than us putting in our operating budget, because it gives us a pool of money that's ready to go and ready to say to any of these grant giving authorities, there's a match, we're ready to go, but we're never exactly sure of the date. So if we budget in 2022 and it doesn't happen until February 2023, then our budget's out of whack. But if we create this fund, then we're ready to go. That's the idea of ready to go funding. So that's more on the innovative project side. On the beneficial electrification, we've done a kind of shortcut of rebates, but that's not the only thing we're thinking about. It's really to encourage those 100% electric projects, especially for nonprofits, schools, low-income members who would like to go there, would like to, have 100% electric, but are faced with that, initial spend that can be prohibitive. So if we're really looking to create a fund, once again, if there are matching dollars, we can take advantage of that to expand our beneficial electrification rebates and incentives and really stretch those dollars by having a fund available for matching and to really benefit the cooperative and all the members by promoting a beneficial electrification. So that's really the rationale for the UCC allocation that we're recommending. I think I can see one question, but what we'd really like to do today, if ideally, is to get a vote on this and get this approved. So I can see 4 questions. I don't know who was first, but the first one I saw was Sue, so I'll go with that one.
All right, thank you. I have heard some pushback on the Animus View pilot project. And I understand it is probably a low or very low income community. But what I'm hearing is that we are subsidizing and targeting a group of people that the other members are paying for. And, I keep trying to explain to them it's unused capital credits and that, we have certain projects that we are trying to help with and that kind of thing. But, people tend to not get it. So I would caution us on probably doing another project along those lines. It sounds like that one was successful, but people are not understanding why their money's going to subsidize another member when they feel like it ought to be coming back to them. So, I think there's an educational process there that needs to be completed, or we need to really not fund those. I think nonprofits are good, schools are good, partnering with, Fort Lewis, those kind of projects are good, but and other schools and nonprofits, but I'm not sure about targeting a community within our community. That's my comment.
I think you're right, Sue. There's an educational element there, but with unclaimed capital credits, we have no option to give them back to other members. It's use it or lose it.
Right.
Type.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, but our members don't. So
yeah.
At the very least, we need a huge educational campaign if we are going to do that type of project again.
Understood. I'm just going to go in the order that I see everybody. So if I've got this wrong in terms of who put their hand up first, please, I apologize. Joe.
On the Native Scholarship matching grant, I know that that's for an endowment. I'm just curious, so there's a tuition waiver for Native students. So I'm assuming this money goes to what, books and housing and transportation and those sort of things. Does anybody know that?
I believe so. Jessica, do you have anything else on that?
I'll have to look at the documentation, but we put that documentation, Carl, you sent that out, didn't you, from the port?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so it should be included in that.
Yeah, it doesn't really explain exactly what it's for. So
Okay.
anyway, just kind of curious there. And then as far as the STEM grants, how would is there a way for us to monitor those, or will they be reporting back to us, and what the kind of programs that are being set up and things?
Yeah, I think the intent is that we'd work with those communities to fund a STEM program. And for example, I know Bob is already involved in Pagosa on some STEM work. And I think what we would do is we'd come back to report to the board on what programs those would be funding.
Yeah, it'd just be great to hear what they're doing.
Agreed.
With that money. And then on the funds that go to Roundup, is this an addition, or is this an additional bump for Roundup, or is it just continuing what they usually get from unclaimed capital credits?
This is a continuation. That it's in policy that it's $5,000 a month, plus obviously what they get from members rounding up their bills, and they do get some sundry other donations as well.
Okay, thanks.
Tim?
Thanks. So, overall, I think this is well thought out, and I'm fairly in support of these recommendations. However, the encourage beneficial electrification aspect of that, I'm supportive of encouraging beneficial electrification, but I wonder if there isn't some opportunity to also address what is a really large kind of issue, impactful issue for our community around workforce and other affordable housing, and tie these together somehow. The rebates to schools and things like that, nonprofits and so forth, maybe that's a route there, but I'd like to see more of a direct tie. And notwithstanding Sue's comment about pushback on animus view, my understanding that capital credits are not necessarily one member spending money on another member, because they're unclaimed. They're a pool of funds that we use, like Carl said. And while that's probably in her comment about a need for education, I think is also very worthwhile. But when you do these projects, that creates that opportunity for that type of education, in my opinion. So that has to be probably factored in. But, this community is really, and as are many across Southwest Colorado, I assume similarly in Pagosa and Archuleta County as well. I'm not sure how much 150,000 moves the needle on that, but I think there's some opportunity there. I recall Holy Cross, for example, did a workforce housing community, helped with that in building it. I saw a video on it here a month or two ago. One of the things they contributed was time, energy, and money on heat pumps for heating the units, and it was geared towards workforce housing. I just think those are the kinds of things. I don't know if that's true, if that innovative. I don't think so. I think that's encourage beneficial electrification in a way that addresses more than one issue in our community. So I'm just going to put my my hope out there, and otherwise I support the the recommendations. Thanks.
If I could step in here for a second, just on a quick process note. So this conversation is leading up to a vote. And Graham, correct me if I'm thinking about this wrong. Would it be better if we actually call for a motion and then have this conversation be framed around that, or should we just be having a sort of an organic conversation as we're currently doing?
I think that's a good point, John. I think ultimately this would be at this point, since the debate is sort of going on, these aren't just sort of direct questions for Carl and more sort of big picture philosophical questions or policy statements. We should have a motion in a second, and then we should open it up for discussion and possible amendment or whatever the direction it takes. But I think that's a great point. We should have a motion in a second before any further discussion.
I'll move to approve the recommended uses of unclaimed capital credits as contained in the document here.
I'll second.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So now let's continue the discussion, and don't let that derail anybody's thoughts or comments here. But I thought it was important to comment on this is where this conversation is going. And now that we have a motion opened up, it sort of tightens and focuses everybody a little bit more. So carry on. Rachel, you were next up, and Carl, if you want to continue to manage the conversation after Rachel speaks, go ahead.
Is my hand up there somewhere?
It is up.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see it here.
Yeah, thanks for all the hard work that went into this. My ear flagged when you said, looking for opportunities that already exist versus creating new ones as pertains to education, something like that. And I'm just reflecting back on some of the challenges we had when we kind of created our own grant, and just managing that. And it's basically like standing up a whole new program. So I love that. I also really want to just acknowledge how thinking about capital credits as a mechanism to leverage additional funds and resources getting into the community in the region. And on that, kind of had similar thoughts to Tim in some ways, and was looking back at policy 203, and just want to flag it for the policy committee as a potential opportunity to review and discuss. I don't know, there's just some interesting limitations in some ways to the 203 and how it allows us to use unclaimed capital credits. And I don't know if this is policy or if this is more just like a matrix of what one funds, but if there are ways where staff, as you're vetting different projects that you want to use this money for, criteria like shovel ready, partners are in place, like all the things you would do just for normal feasibility, but also that piece that it might not be tied explicitly to the grid, but might be something that's advancing other issues in the community, like housing, but maybe doing it through the electric kind of lens. Or the other big one that just kept popping in mind for me was broadband, because that's another area where I know our participation is a little bit fuzzy, but it will also require some matching funds. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem like there's a way that what we've got set aside could be leveraged in a grant should the opportunity arise based on the limitations of 203. That was a long statement. The other thing I'll just flag for Carl, when you said use it or lose it for capital credits, I wonder if that's a place to launch from for messaging and education. What ping for me is, it sounds, if you like frame it as almost as a parallel to water rights in some ways, if that might connect with some people.
Thanks, Rachel. Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you. Two things. I would like to weigh in on the Innovative Projects Fund, and I think as we are looking to use those funds, and if we can do them for matching, right? Yeah, for thinking about attainable housing, thinking about broadband to underserved areas. those are good. I don't think that changes the outline that we see here. I'm just saying that as we do look at spending those innovative project funds, I would like to make sure that we keep those goals in mind. Then I would like to point out, and I'm on page 61 of the board packet, and what it looks like is that we're also making a decision that says we want to spend our unclaimed capital credits every year, and not try to. In the past, we've carried a bit over for emergencies. We have other places in the budget for emergency funding to help if there's a fire and we want to donate some money to one of those causes. In the past, and I don't think anybody that I know on the current board has voiced this, of folks wanting to have a buffer in here. I am not a proponent of a buffer in here. I'm just pointing out that there is not a buffer, but it does get refilled every year. Put that out to folks. And along those lines, and Carl, this is a question for you. And again, I'm looking on page 61. At the top, I'm kind of about what's my refill? And what is my refill? How much am I getting or expecting to get, for instance, this year from unpaid capital credits or unclaimed capital credits?
Do you mean how much you're expecting to get each year?
Yeah, so I'm seeing the amount transferred of 539,815. I'm seeing the prior year carryover. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking at to say, okay, those are our new unclaimed capital funds that we can work with.
So that we really don't know. I mean, you expect it to be fairly consistent, but until it happens, you just don't know.
So for 2022, we do know.
Yes.
And that number is?
Well, the 540,000 is that's what we've got right now. But what will happen next year, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, and that's a combination of the prior year carryover. So where I see the amount transferred, that was for 2018, the unclaimed capital credits for 2018, which
correct.
So that amount transferred, you don't know that from year to year, but we can see over time. Well, some years it gets replenished a lot. This was over $500,000, but the last time it was over $500,000 was in 2018 when we were retiring 2014 capital credits. So, but they're big numbers. They're almost always going to be 6 digits.
Right.
Yes.
And Kirsten, can I put a fine point on what you said in regards to, I think it's a good point in regards to thinking through the future strategy of how to strategically use these unclaimed capital credits. Because at one point, and this goes back to Joe Lewandowski, we are thinking that we may want to build a pot of funds for fire mitigation with unclaimed capital credits. And so this year, we really wanted to focus more on beneficial electrification, to have a pot of money ready to go for the federal government when they come down with matching grants, so that we're ready to match grants. But you'll probably see next year, we're going to ask for a large amount of money to start to build another pot of money for fire mitigation, because we just do not know what's going to happen. And the last thing I think we want to do is create rate instability and shocks to our members. And so if we can mitigate that by being more thoughtful and strategic on some of these pots of money with unclaimed capital credits, we'd like to. So to Kirsten's point, I think we're going to see these are big numbers. She's right. And they're going to continue to be big. So let's be more strategic and thoughtful about how we use this in the future, and probably build up a fire mitigation kind of pot. So I thank you, Kirsten, for bringing that up.
And that's it for my questions. Thank you for your time.
Bob?
There, turn my sound off and disappear. question I have, and one, this is great, and I think the innovative projects and things have been used really wisely, and just so happy we can do that kind of thing. What I wanted to know how far along the thinking is, Jessica, on the process and the application and the criteria and the decision authority, just where that rests with this. Because when someone from Bill Pagosa that I talked to last weekend or somewhere else talks to me about maybe we could get apply for some money at LPEA, I don't really know what to say in terms of other than talk to you, or and that might be just sending more calls your way that you don't need. Are we formalizing the application process? Because like the FLC one, we kind of get what someone thought up on their own, and that sort of drives the decision around that. But other people, I'm not sure they know timeframes and criteria and all the things associated with applying for a grant or something.
So Bob, I'll take a crack at this. In regards to the STEM programming, I think what we want to do is just, we already know the entities in both counties that already have STEM programs developed and potentially ready to go, right? And so one of them is the library in Pagosa that wants to add the STEM lab. I think that's what we're thinking, is that we already know people are pretty far along. In regards to the beneficial electrification, what we're going to do is we're only talking about this money's going to match federal grant funds or state grants. So they already have a process. So this is not a process where people just come in and apply for grants through us. We're creating a pot of money so that when the state comes down with funding, like the DOLA funds for broadband, we need to match that. Fortunately, we already have the budget for that, for broadband, for communications, because that grant helps us with our comms and our operations that we would have to pay anyway. So what this does is this is more like Pagosa or Durango or Bayfield or any of these other communities saying, we would like to rebuild this school, and there's state money to do this, but they're looking for a grant, for a matching grant. That's where we'd like to get involved. So it's not just sending out grant money. We want to double our money by partnering with other folks in the community.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah. But the little part that I'm not sure I understand is, so somebody at Bill Pagosa says they want to talk about money. There isn't an application I can tell them to fill out and send in to be considered for that STEM world? Is it all just kind of relationship? Who knows who talked to who?
Right now, I think that's what it is, Bob. I wish I had a better answer on that.
Okay, then if it is that, then could maybe some of us directors in that area be involved in this final decision?
Absolutely. Yeah. We would like to. Yeah.
Who's who and what and all that. So
yeah, no, and thank you for bringing that up, Bob. No, I think that's the intention, is that we would work with the directors in that area to say, okay, is this a good project? Is this what we want to do? Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Then I've got John.
All right, I very much like supporting, local college and advanced education like that. However, I have 4 kids that have gone through or still in college up at Fort Lewis, and there's a tuition waiver already, and lots of money that comes through that program. And it's a very small number of folks. And I find that difficult to support, especially when it almost looks like we took money out of the rate stabilization line, and that line can help all members. We're saying we don't have an avenue in which to give money back to members that wasn't theirs, but we do have a way, under the fiduciary responsibility to help as many members as we can. A lot of that matching grant line, those are out-of-state students. And, while I applaud helping with, furthering their education, I just think that fiduciary responsibility says that we should keep some of that money available or have it in a rate stabilization for all members, especially in these next couple of years where we're looking at having to pay that $200,000 penalty for going over our 5% solar, or we have, such a large inflation rate that we're not sure what rates are going to do as we move into our partial contract. And so I'm looking at a way to benefit, as many members as possible. And I feel like that grant stuff, there's already lots of money there. Most of the students that I'm aware of in there end up making money on a, semester by semester, going to school at Fort Lewis when there's already a tuition waiver. And under the beneficial electrification, there's lots of those avenues, those matching grants with federal money that's coming out there. It seems like we should be poised to have enough in those funds to be able to cover that wherever it's going to go, if that's part of broadband or communications or other initiatives that we're going to have. And I'd rather see it go in that direction than $100,000 that is part of a matching of $1 million that Fort Lewis College already received for that. That's my comment. Thanks.
Thanks, John. The only thing I would add to that is we didn't take anything out of rate stabilization. We have that built up to $4 million. So that was the level that we were aiming for. And that's why we didn't look to put anything in that one. But I just wanted to let you know on that one. Dan?
Yeah, real fast, Carl, and I just want to clarify a few other points. So we'll get clarity from Fort Lewis College on the funding, but I was just going back and looking at they sent a description of the program. So just to clarify, they received $1 million. This is their largest grant ever, or endowment. So this is in perpetuity. So what it does is obviously you only need to put in a one-time donation, and then it grows and it keeps continuing over time. And so they're trying to raise $200,000 a year until they get to $1 million. So that will take them 5 years. And so we thought that it would be, beneficial to support that community, since they're asking us specifically, at the one time $100,000 that will then grow and grow and grow. And so and again, I'll get clarity on what it actually funds, but in that document that we attached to your board packet, it does talk about how many, they've already started this and how many scholarships were awarded over time. And so it does say that as of year 3, they did award 30 scholarships. And it says number of Native American business majors is 248. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up the numbers just in case anyone was curious on that. Well, we'll get more details.
So Dan Huntington.
Yeah, this might not be the place to be bringing this up, but it's considered electrification beneficial. What about retrofits on stuff, making a bicycle electric, retrofitting it with a drive and all of that, so that you don't have to spend the $8,000 for a new one. We had a member retrofit one and applied for a rebate and was denied. Said he had to buy a new one to get the rebate. I think maybe we need to reevaluate some of the criteria for some of this stuff so that it can be better serve the community and not have to junk a bike to get a retrofit it and get an easier pedaling bike. So anyway, I had a member bring this up to me, and so I thought I'd bring it up here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. We'll look into that, and I'll work with Hillary and her team.
Rachel?
Yeah, I'll echo that for Dan because I tried that and they said no too. So I think it's a more equitable option because they are expensive. But I was just gonna comment on, it goes way back to, I think somebody was talking, or Bob had asked, if the local members would be able to approve, the local reps, board reps would be able to be involved, or I think you actually said approve the projects that are getting funded in those areas. And just to kind of bring this back up, so policy 203, just to read it, I can't share my screen, but the board may fund an innovative project. The board may fund an innovative projects fund for the cooperative. And then it sets forward all these guidelines. So that's where it does say, so interesting, projects must be owned, operated, or under control of the cooperative. So I don't know if these STEM projects apply for that. Projects and studies must be for investigating newer technologies in the area of electric energy. And ultimately, staff cooperative will present projects for consideration of the board. So I think that's all relevant to what we're talking about here, but just helpful to understand.
And I just received an email back from the Fort. They said the Native American tuition waiver at Fort Lewis College only covers the tuition portion of cost of attendance. The total cost of attendance includes student fees, room and board and books. So for Native American students, while a tuition of $7,000 is covered, the additional $13,000 plus is not a significant barrier. So the scholarship endowments greatly help with Native American students through their graduation. So anyway, just wanted to relay that information.
And Bob?
I must have not lowered my hand. Sorry. I'm good.
That's it, I think, John.
I call for the question.
Ted, hang on a second. We got Ted.
Oh, sorry, Ted.
Thanks. I'll make it
Just one second, right? So Dan, are you calling the question?
Yes.
Okay, so that we proceed to immediate vote. Sorry, Ted, but under the rules, we proceed to immediate vote. So if we want to hear Ted's question, vote against calling the question. If you want to proceed to a vote immediately, vote for it. Does everybody sort of understand the vote on calling the question?
Yes. So we need a hands up to call the question, to approve the question.
Yep. So
okay.
So
all in favor of calling the question, hold your hand up. Say aye. Well, if Ted's voting for it, read between the lines. All opposed. All abstained. Okay, so the question is now called. And so now that means we move to an immediate vote on the matter of approving the allocation of unclaimed capital credits as recommended. All in favor, hold your hand up, say aye.
Wait, I'm not following this.
I'm sorry, did I do that wrong?
Yep.
I'm not sure. I thought.
I'm sorry, did I do that? Yeah. Go ahead, Tim, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not quite understanding. I thought you were asking for a vote to call the question, and there I only saw 3 hands go up. So to me, that would fail. And therefore we would go back to discussion. Is that correct?
So I don't, what was the total vote? Could we have everybody sort of re-show the hands and have?
Okay, I'm sorry, that was my bad. I was moving too quickly. Let's just redo that again. All in favor of calling the question, hold your hand up and say aye. Let's get the count there.
6, 7,
You're
8,
9. Kirsten.
9. Okay. 9. All right. So 9 carries then.
okay. Well, let's get the vote, right? So all opposed, hold your hand up. Okay, I see two, and then all abstain. Sue is abstaining.
And Rachel didn't vote. Rachel's not there.
I put my hand up for
Oh,
the
okay. All right.
in favor. I don't know if my video unmuted or I tried.
Okay, so thank you for that correction. So the vote has been called. And so now we turn
Now
our
I
attention
proceed immediately to the
vote.
vote on the, which is, the motion is to adopt the allocation of the unclaimed capital credits as presented.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor, hold your hand up and let's leave them up there for a second so we can do a true vote count here. Not true, but
Accurate.
accurate. Thank you. Did you get it, Graham?
Yep,
Yes.
just 1 second. Yep. And I have it.
Okay, all opposed?
So I'm seeing John Lee and Sue McWilliams as opposed. Is that correct? Right.
Okay, all abstained? Okay. Okay, the motion carries. And thanks for the help on that, Tim. Doing this stuff properly matters.
Pleasure.
Okay. Kirsten, did you have just a quick comment or something?
Yeah, it's a process comment about what just happened. So I think if Jessica hadn't just read us that email that she got back from Fort Lewis talking about it, then this was going to be a table vote for me. So it is important that we all have the information we need in order to do that. So if any of us as directors feel that we didn't get that, that came just in time and that was perfect, it was perfect, then we have to wait. But I appreciate that. And as far as calling the question, I would encourage each of us to be, if you see somebody's hand up, maybe it was it was at the same time, but let's not cut off conversation too early. We should be cautious. And again, I voted for calling the question because Ted had voted for calling the question, and he was the one with the bloody hand up. So just from a process standpoint, it's a good process to use, but let's be thoughtful about it. Thank you.
Agreed. Fair enough. Thank you for that comment. Okay, so we are cleared of Financial Audit Committee update and the discussion around unclaimed capital credits. So we're going to push on to Election Supervisory Committee update.
Yeah, and if I could take that, John, as the under the policies, I'm sort of the proxy for the Election Supervisory Committee, and a question came up regarding our policies on campaign finance disclosures. And I think hopefully everyone's had a chance to review my memo, basically to boil it down to the idea that our bylaws really only require it for people that are running for election, and there's no election currently scheduled. Election has been canceled, but nevertheless, just to be a belt and suspenders, sort of clear the Election Supervisory Committee would like some little clearer guidance on this. And so unless we kind of want to get real deep into discussing gerunds and participles and infinitives, I would just suggest that we have a motion to adopt the amendment to section 2E of policy 107 that I proposed in my memo.
Okay.
I'll move adoption of the memo of the policy change.
Okay.
And I'll share my screen so that
I'll
everyone can see.
Second.
Okay, so great. Second. Kohler, did you have a comment? Okay, so now the floor is open for discussion. So Kohler.
I know, I was just seconding that. Sorry. And
Okay.
I lost my Zoom, so I'm not too sure how to get my hand down.
Okay. Tim, I saw your hand up a second ago. Did you have something or were you looking to get that motion in?
I was just going to make the motion. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Looks like Joe. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Graham for the grammar lesson. It's been a long time since I've talked about participles. Had to look it up. Thanks.
As long as they're not dangling.
Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, just a bit of a point of clarification that that Graham did talk to me about this from the perspective of, it's a policy issue and whether or not it should run through the policy committee. And we sort of felt like this really was a opportunity for the board to vote on clarifying the policy and not really a policy change here, and that it probably for that reason wasn't required or didn't deserve to go through the extra time that would have been required to get it through policy committee. So I definitely supported this coming up under the election supervisory committee.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All in favor? Hold your hand up and say aye.
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 Okay. All opposed? All abstained? Okay. I'm sorry.
John,
Did you,
Rachel.
hang on a second, Sue, were you abstaining from that? I just saw your hand. Okay.
Oh, yeah, so it is, so is there anybody objecting to us identifying this as unanimous? That's what I got.
the only thing is that John Lee is not present. He
Okay.
texted me, he had to go fight a fire. So he's
Okay, so-
gone.
So he's excused,
Yes.
but
Okay.
he wouldn't count. I won't get into I'll leave my discussions to gerunds and participles and won't go any further.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Pushing on, we have an audit presentation.
And I am here.
Right, Carl, did you want to kick that off?
Sure. Thanks, John. Yeah, I'd like to reintroduce Tammy Totsky, who is our audit manager from audit partner, pardon me, Tammy, from BKD, who I actually had the pleasure of meeting in person for the first time this year. So that was great. And Tammy will be running through our 2021 audited financials that you should have received last week. So over to you, Tammy. Thank you very much.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. I am going to share my screen. So, I'm not sure how I have this set up exactly, but slides are going to be coming any second now. So let me know, give me a thumbs up when you see it. All right. Okay, so I am here today, of course, as Carl said, to present the audit report. I do tend to do a little slide presentation with not getting into the real guts of every piece of paper of the audit report, but certainly am happy to go through any of that with you. I do have reports in front of me. They should have been provided to you electronically also. So really any questions, this is your time to ask. So we'll begin with the presentation. As you know, every year when we do an audit, we have to make sure that we are assessing risk. And so when we plan our audits, we look at the risk to your company, and then we're required to give some kind of communication back to you. So what we're going to talk about today is the actual opinion that you received, and then some of the internal communications that we need to have with you regarding the audit report. So if you were to pull up the audit report for this past year, you'll see that the actual wording in the audit report differs a little bit from how it was last year. The good news is that you received a clean opinion, and I always like to read this paragraph. It does say, in our opinion, the accompanied financial statements of La Plata are presented fairly in all material respects as of December 31st, 2021 and 2020. What has changed is the fact that the new audit report had some new guidelines that auditors are supposed to file. And so it split the audit report up into about 5 different categories: the opinion, the basis for our opinion, your responsibilities as management, our responsibilities, and then any other reported communication we're supposed to give. And I think by doing so, it does provide for a little bit more fluid type of reading if you were to go in and read that audit report. And then we also provided an audit communication letter, which we're going to go through in a little more detail here as we move through the slides. So as far as audit entries are concerned, we didn't have any from our point this year. We did receive some client prepared entries that we input and put in as audit entries. I think what's important to note here is that we come and do the audit at the beginning of February. And as you know, information comes in later than that as time moves forward. And so when we are looking at our final audit numbers, we might not have the allocation back from Tri-State for their final allocation. We might not have property tax notices back. Those are usually sent out in February for what we're going to pay actually on 2021 property tax. And then Fast Tracks, we have a 75% interest in that company, and those financial statements were not ready for us until like mid-March. And so those 3 items in itself do kind of hold up the audit a bit in the facts that we do need to get finalized numbers for those. And those were the entries that were prepared by Monica, and we reviewed them and agreed with them, and they were posted as audit entries. As far as past adjustment entries, those are entries where a person, management may elect not to record one of our suggested entries. We didn't have any issues like that this year. I'm going to move into the letter now for a little bit, and I don't know if we've ever really taken a deep dive into the letter, so I thought this year it might be a good idea to go ahead and talk about some of the things that we've done just procedurally wise, looking at the risk that is for your company. So first of all, we look at management override, and that's a risk at every company that exists. There's always a chance that management could override some existing function. And because of that, we look at journal entries that are written. We look at significant unusual transactions. We look at estimates. And we're really trying to make sure that there's a proper business use for that transaction. And then we also want to make sure that approvals are given. And I think, an example of that could be, just take the process of trying to order something. Someone needs to create a purchase order. That purchase order needs to be approved to go out and buy it. And then once it gets bought, an invoice needs to be approved to pay for the transaction. And then when you get the equipment, someone needs to look at it to make sure we got the equipment that we were requesting. And so all of those steps are looked at during your audit. Now, we don't look at every single item, but we do use statistical samples. We do use some artificial intelligence to sort through all of the transactions and pull out the ones that look questionable or large or different to us. And the good news is that no matters were reportable. So with the things that we did look at, all of them appeared to be properly approved and for business use. And I should state on these upcoming slides, whenever you see that no matters are reportable, that's a good thing. That's what you want to see there. Another one we looked at was management estimates. Management estimates and judgments could materially affect the financial statements. These include things like depreciation, unbilled revenues, your medical claims reserves. You might recall last year, we did discuss the medical claim reserve and how we thought maybe it was a little too high, and steps were taken this year to reduce that down to a more reasonable level. So again, no matters reportable, but we do look at these things and we'll touch on depreciation and unbilled revenue in the slides to come. But, if you think of, I might as well address it right now. If you think of depreciation, if there was a technology that we were using and all of a sudden this technology, the next latest and greatest thing came out, well, then the life of your investment, the asset that you purchased, might not be worth as much as we thought it was going to be. We might have to accelerate that depreciation and write it off faster. That would be one reason that depreciation is considered an estimate. Same with unbilled revenues. You might have a certain cutoff point. Let's say we ended our billing on December 15th. There's still half a month of billing that needs to get billed, and that won't come out until January. So again, that is an estimate for purposes of management estimates. And again, the ones that we saw, we felt were in line and no matters reportable. Long-term debt, of course, you are required to meet certain covenants for your debt. Currently, that debt service ratio is not to be less than 1.35, and you're sitting at above 2, so you're good there. The equity to asset ratio is another thing that your lenders typically will look at, because if you drop to less than 40%, you start to have a little bit of restriction on how much you can pay back for capital credits. And right now, La Plata is sitting at 52%, so no concern there either. So as far as the debt compliance, no matters were noted there either. Plant was a place that we really dug into this year. And of course, the risk there would be if you had improper classification just in your fixed assets. So we did a sample of a variety of items. We looked at additions, retirements, work order closings, labor capitalization, again, depreciation provisions. And we went through and again, made sure that the proper approvals were there, same from that last slide, but dug even further to make sure that items that were being coded to your fixed assets were going into the correct accounts, and, costs that were being accumulated for work orders were actually for work order costs, and that labor that was being capitalized was actually for work that your plant men were coding to work orders for things and items they were doing. That is a pretty significant chunk of the audit, and it does take a couple of days to get through. And again, no matters noted. I mean, we did take a deep dive. I know that Monica spent a lot of time with our staff, and she was very helpful. And we kind of swung at some things that maybe weren't asked before, and you guys were always able to provide an answer. So that went well. We also look at impairment issues, and this one can be a little bit hard to explain because there might not be a whole lot of items that relate to your company. However, we do look at investments and regulatory assets and matters like that. I think if you have marketable securities, of course, those are always written to market. If I bought an iPhone and it was $100 and now it's worth 500, we look at that. But in things specific to you, we look at kind of the capital credits in investments in affiliated companies that you have. The fast track investment that we own 75% of, is what we're recording on our books really in play at fair market value, or is there an impairment issue? And a good example that I can think of in the state of Colorado, I'm sure you have all heard about it. There's a power plant that will be closing early, located down by Pueblo. And, you know, there are impairment issues with that just because people had expected that plant to survive for, you know, 20, 30 years, and now it has to be accelerated and condensed down. Other things that could happen, you may own a stock in a partnership, or I mean, you may own a partnership interest, and you know what happens if that partnership declares bankruptcy or just has a really rough couple of years? You know, is that cost that's recorded on those books still a viable number? And again, we noted no impairments, no matters noted. But we did take a look at the items that were on your books, regulatory assets, right-of-ways, tri-state, fast track, CFC investments. But you're receiving allocations and getting refunds on those allocations for those investments. So we thought they were properly stated. Revenue recognition is another place where we take a look because this is your year-end cutoff. So there can be places where, you know, revenue is earned in 2021, and so it should be booked in 2021, but there's instances where that won't happen until 2022. And the cutoff that I mentioned earlier, you know, if we stop our billing on December 15th, there's still half a month there of revenue that should be recorded in 2021. So we did look at those cutoff procedures, reviewed the unbilled estimate, and found it to be a reasonable estimate. And again, no matters noted. But you know, you want to make sure that every year you're really reviewing those items and questioning and making sure that the information that you're getting is your best estimate of what you can get. Also with revenue recognition, some industry specific items are maybe, you know, our major form of revenue is electrical services, and 97% of our revenues came from that electric operation. Another 1% came from like resale of items to customers or rent, some types of items that we would consider other. And then about 2% came from investing income. So as far as industry specific rules, we don't have a lot that we have to dig into for revenue recognition. There are other industries where that can be a bigger issue if they are giving free service to people, or if they have some type of promotional events, which that doesn't happen a lot here, but you know, with 97% of our revenues coming from the electric industry itself, that made that part kind of easy for me. So no matters noted there. Again, just touching on the significant estimates. I think we talked about depreciation of plant. You probably have a good idea of what is going on there. Again, the medical claims reserves, our goal will be to continue to look at our claims experience and accrue for any increase or decrease that we're seeing, but not to over accrue. I think at the end of 2020, we were having an accrual of about 2.5 million on our books, and that was a little high. It's back down to $1 million now. Regulatory accounting, again, the cooperative, you have the ability to defer items, and that's at the discretion of the board. So things that can be included in that all kind of relate to that medical claims reserve, but we do have our rate stabilization fund going now. And that is just an item that we have chose to defer just in looking at how our rates are going to be in the next couple of years and what our budget needs are. So I know you're all well aware of that. The last thing I wanted to touch on was taxes. You are an exempt organization. You do need to meet the 85% test. And what that means is 85% of the revenues do need to come from your members. And for La Plata, we were fine. Again, our membership revenue was sitting at 97.51%. But I do bring that up because it is something to be aware of, just in case you were to drop below that 85% membership. I don't think that I am currently showing you my head. Are there any questions at this point? Otherwise, I'm going to jump into a little bit of the numbers and show you some graphs. Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on then. So if I show you the cash and cash equivalents that have kind of happened over the last 5 years, we'll see starting at 2017 on the left and moving forward to 2021, we had an increase. We were kind of chugging along. 2020 came, it dipped a little bit. In 2021, we're heading back up again. Our cash and cash equivalents were sitting at $3.9 million at the end of the year. Again, it's a December 31st number. Please know that as of December 31st means it is a picture in time. That doesn't mean that every day that you walk into the cooperative that we have $13 or $14 million sitting on our hands just waiting to be spent. There's good reasons. You know, we may have a power bill coming up. We may have capital credits to pay. But I think it's just good to look at this and just see that there's not a significant drop going down from 20 to 21. I will state that the FDIC does insure $250,000 per bank. Right now, we're about 8 million over that amount. I just have to mention it. I don't believe that we're in a time right now where we fear a risk of banks closing, but that's just a risk that's hanging out there. Plant additions, you can see again, going from left to right, we had some increases from 17 to 18, 18 to 20, you know, kind of stable, decreasing a little bit, and then 21 down even a little bit further. You know, I don't have any concerns here either. My guess is that number will probably go up in the coming year. We were coming out of a pandemic. We were, you know, even though we were still having to be critical employees and keep open and keep our business up and running, you know, there was a lot going on that did put a damper on some construction, but we did have a full 9.7, almost $9.8 million go back in the plant in 2021. That's healthy. That shows that you care for your customers and want to continually expand and offer the best services that you can. This screen, I kind of like it because if you look at 2021 at the top, 2017 at the bottom, you can see how debt is decreasing. Now, while this may look like it's decreasing a lot faster than we would expect, you know, you can see that it starts out at this 135 million and we're down to 112 million in 2021. Things to point out and keep in mind there, debt will continue to be, of course, a budgetary item in years going forward. I think we have about $5.4 million due in principal payments in 2022. That number will continually decrease every year. If debt were to stay the same, it'll be 5.3, then 4.2, but still about $5 million that need to be paid back yearly on long-term debt. This graph I kind of like because it just shows how we're trending along with our allocations. So the purple part is allocations that can be made, and then the blue part is the refunds that we refunded back to customers. And you can see that from 17, 18, 19, it all kind of follows that trend where we don't automatically pay back customers for everything that we allocate, but we're keeping a good trend with the gap there. I think in 2020, you'll notice that there was a little bit of a peak in the allocation side of things, and that was related to our PPP loan. If you remember, through the CARES Act, we did receive about a $1.9 million loan, and that forgiveness was given in 2020, and that's why you see that little jump bump there. And that carries over into this discussion also. The purple line is your net margins. Again, you see that 2020 bump for that PPP loan forgiveness, but the blue line is operating margins. And you can see how from 17 to 18, we took a little dip, but we have had a steady increase from 19 to 20 to 21. You know, part of that can be related to COVID services that everybody just required maybe a little more electricity with people being at home with children doing school and parents working from home. But you know, it's a steady increase, and it's a good thing to see. There aren't a lot of industries that are in this same market, so I think we're on a steady trend. Just some other comments. When I looked at the financial statement notes, there were a couple of things that, if I were a reader, just kind of caught my eye, and so I thought I'd mention them to you. We do have some related parties, and those are vendors or people that we do a lot of business with. Tri-State, of course, is the G&T company that we were associated with, and our cost of power before any kind of solar credits or any types of credits decreased a little bit. It was down 1% from the year before. Still bought $63.5 million of power from Tri-State, a big healthy number, but it did decrease just a little bit from the year before. Tri-State was able to allocate back to us a portion of their margins. They're a cooperative just like you are. And so they gave over 1.3 million back as an allocation, and actually refunded a check of $1 million or 1.73 for capital credit refunds. Another vendor that we deal a lot with, Western United, total purchases there for that company were 4.2 million for the year. And that's pretty comparable to the prior year, but it's a big number. And so it's just one that I would bring your attention to. I thought it was an interesting fact. We don't talk a lot about fast tracks. That is audited by another accounting firm, but we do use their audit in the consolidation of your report. And their margins were down. Their net margin was down 762 versus 969 from the year before. But that was really specifically related to their PPP loan. They had received one of 219,000. So, you know, if you were to subtract that out of the 2020 year end, they are very comparable from year to year. And so I guess I just do point that out as one of the bottom lines, that, you know, this PPP loan will affect your comparability from last year to this year. So just make sure that if you're taking a deeper dive and looking at some of those non-operating margins and numbers, that you remember that 1.9 million is in there as a PPP forgiveness loan in your gains in that non-operating section. And I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but the leasing standard does take effect in 2022. So you are going to see some changes come. I know that there's not a ton of leases at La Plata, but there are some that we need to look into. This does cover land easements. It does cover right of ways. And you know, pardon me for not being through all of my training modules yet. But what happens is your asset becomes a right of use asset, and the amount that you owe left on any of these kind of contracts is going to be put on your balance sheet as a liability. And because of that, some people that are really close on their debt covenants do have concern, because it could skew some of their debt service coverage or their equity to asset ratios. Again, La Plata is pretty healthy, so I would hope that that wouldn't have any kind of issue for you, but I do need to bring it to your attention. All right, how about questions again? I'm just gonna throw that up here. Here's my contact info, but I am happy to jump into the actual audit report or go over any of these slides in more detail. You know, I think what's important is that I really, kind of hard to explain, you know, we did bring a couple of new people down for the audit this year. And when you have new people, you do get a lot of questions. And I think Carl and Monica and everybody that we dealt with was very friendly and helpful and open. But from my point of view, when you bring new people down, there is a heightened sense maybe of professional skepticism. And is this right? And, you know, can you explain this to me better? Because I don't really understand what they said to me. So maybe it was a little bit harder for me personally to make sure that they understood what was going on. But I think you should feel happy that you've gotten all these non-comments or no matters noted, because there was an even deeper dive than maybe what happened even last year. But it was super nice to come down and meet everybody in person. It was a good trip, and I thank your staff for really helping us out and providing all the information that we requested. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim. Why don't you start?
Thank you. Hey, Tammy, that was a great presentation, real clear.
Thank you.
And appreciate it. And yeah, I'm impressed by your communication there. I just had a question about how the PPP is reflected. You mentioned earlier that in one of the slides that it was in 2020, but then I saw full forgiveness in 2021. So
yeah,
give me
and there, you bet. That can be confusing, and I probably didn't say that enough. There were two options that you could take. So you could treat it as a grant, or you could treat it as a loan. And depending on how that treatment went, you either recorded it at the exact time that you got the money, or you recorded it when you knew you had forgiveness. So in your financial statements, we knew we had forgiveness when the audit report was issued in 2020. So we did record that as a forgiveness gain in 2020. And I would have to go back and look up the actual date, but I think we got forgiveness in like early January 2021.
So it ends up being
it's a
given in
2020.
2020. All right.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I just I never understood debt completely, but our goal is long-term debt is 72% of equity. Board approved goal is less than 100%. So I guess two questions. It looks like our debt payment is maybe 5 to 6% of our total revenue. When would there be concern that debt's getting too high? If it hits 80 or 90 or anything like that? Can you?
Yeah, and that was kind of where I was going with the equity to asset ratio. So, or the debt service coverage. There's two covenants in your agreements with CFC, and as long as you are in line with those, you're okay. I think when you look at maybe debt to asset too, I have no way to give you the right answer for that. Let me start by saying that it's management decision. However, I do find that in the electric industry, everyone that I deal with is pretty heavy in debt. When you look at that and you're like, oh, you know, that's half of my assets. You know, I think that's when you start to get concerned is, when are you not going to be able to pay that back? Are you going to be able to do those $5 million worth of debt payments? I think another thing to point out is, if I were to go to your cash flow, you know, you have $15 million that's coming in the door every year from just your operations, right? Your electric service industries minus your cost of those electric services. So I got 15 million to spend. If I spent, like we did this past year, 10 million on plant, that leaves me 5 million to pay with. Well, if I have that $5 million debt, that uses up my cash. And so if I were to extend beyond that, then I would have to look at going out to get more debt to make those numbers come more in line. So I mean, right now, the way I see it is CFC will grant you this full loan that you can draw on. And until you get to that point, you know, I think it's all a cash basis relation. If you can afford the payment, then you're okay. People do get concerned when they start falling away from those covenants, and those are your indicators to tell you that your debt is getting too high.
Yeah, Carl or Jessica, anything to say about that, my question at all? Or?
Yeah, I think I appreciate, Tammy, what you're saying. There is no absolute right answer. You know, we have guidance that you want to be around 45 to 55, or 40 is as low as you want to get in terms of equity. I do, looking at debt, we have reduced it every year, and we're in a very manageable position where we can make we've been able to make pretty significant investments in plant and keep our debt service and keep everything ticking over without going out and borrowing anything else. That's pretty rare, I think, in a co-op. We anticipate we know we will be borrowing this year. That will be happening in the next month or two, but we will still be very much well within those ranges. When we look at the KRTAs of every co-op in the United States, you know, we're in a very healthy position, probably more well above average. So thank you, Tammy. So I think KRTAs is a great resource, because if you look at that and go, oh mine's nothing like that, then you know you've got issues.
Yeah, and I keep that 40% in my mind, just because, and maybe I stressed too much that it was related to the amount of capital credits you could pay back, but that really is kind of the first tier. And then it drops from there to 30%, then to 20%. So once you hit that 40% equity to asset, that's when you maybe have to start being a little concerned. Concerned not that we're going to fail as an industry, but concerned because restrictions will start going on things that you are typically spending your money on.
And Sue?
Right, thank you. You know, as directors, we're always trained by NRCA to ask if there is a reason for an executive session without staff here. And I know in your comments to the board that you had indicated we did not need one. But for the record, I would like to have you tell us if you feel like we need to have an executive session to discuss the audit any further.
Yeah, that's totally up to the board. I'm happy to do that. Again, from my standpoint, there was good communication. There was willingness to provide us with any question that we had. Good rapport. They treated my staff great. So no issues on that side, but no, happy to entertain that idea if anybody thinks we need to discuss it.
Okay, thank you. From your perspective, did you see anything that should cause the board concern?
No, you know, I think we had, and I talked about communication in that audit letter to the board. One thing maybe I didn't stress was significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Those are issues that your controls are breaking down and you aren't able to recover from those. And that's why your auditor or a consultant or an outside regulator could catch some of those things. We didn't have any concerns this year. you know, there's always going to be that segregation of duties. We're a small company. We're going to have some people that maybe have double duties or are double trained. But we think you're doing a good job with the staff that you have, and from a cost benefit standpoint, you know, things are going okay. I think that would probably be really the one item that always comes up in almost every small business that I deal with. But other than that, we didn't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you.
And Ted?
Yeah, thanks. This one's just a quick kudos to BKD and specifically to Tammy. It's been a while, but back when we were reviewing the 400 series policies, there was a question about what was required in our audit, and I was able to reach out to Tammy and got a really prompt and really good answer from her. So thank you very much for being a partner beyond just your presented report to us.
You bet. I mean, that's what we're here for. We want to help. And so when you have a pain point, I'm a phone call or an email away.
Yeah, I want to echo that. The dealing with Tammy and her team is always a pleasure. She's been a great audit partner for us. So long may it continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I guess to close it out, I'll just say, if you haven't heard, our name is going to be changing. We're going through a little bit of a merger of equals come January 1st. I don't see really our office changing much in the way of our procedures or who will be servicing your audit. However, we're going to have new colors. We're not going to be red and blue well, I don't know, because I haven't heard. The announcement's going to come out next week. But if you start seeing my email with a different @ behind it, you'll know that the change has taken place, but still your same crew servicing you and same people contacting. So just wanted to put that out there.
Okay. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
That's all right. I didn't raise my hand. I was just curious, why are you changing your name?
We're merging with another company that is located, really has their footprint in Florida, Atlanta, East Coast, Southern East Coast, just another geographic area for us to concentrate on.
Can you not say who it is, Tammy? Is that not?
I don't know who it is. I mean, the firm we're merging with is DHG, which is Dixon Hughes. But I don't know what we're going to be called. I don't know. That's all coming.
I was just wondering who the firm you're merging with. So you mentioned that.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yep.
Terrific.
Thank you for all your work.
You bet.
Okay, so we have the same timing challenge that we've always had that we usually have with Matt. So I would suggest that we use, if we can crank through the attorney report before the break, maybe, and then we'll take a 30-minute break and we'll pick up the conversation at 12:30 unless anybody has any objections to that sequence. Okay, terrific. All right, Graham, you want to give us the attorney report?
Certainly, I think everyone can review the report that I've submitted. Sort of updated a couple of other issues that were starting to come before the General Assembly, but sort of fairly reflective of ongoing work. I'll just accept any questions anybody has. Tim.
Thanks, Graham. Electric school bus contract for Tri-State Policy 115.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess because of its storage component and Tri-State's, I'm just not sure where we are, where Tri-State's Policy 115 affects. Can you give a little background and help me understand it, so maybe I can ask a question or not have to ask a question?
Sure. And I don't know if I see Dan's name on there, but I know he's sort of also kind of And hopefully he and I can kind of tag team this one a little bit, but I think, this is sort of part of the idea that the ability to shave our peak using this battery sort of implicates policy 115. And so we need to have our agreements with Tri-State and frankly, our agreements with 9R about how we operate the battery sort of all in place in order to meet that policy and shave that peak demand under our wholesale electric service contract.
Yeah,
is that right, Dan?
I'll add a little bit to that, Tim. So there's two aspects of policy 115. There's the energy, the kilowatt hours, and there's the capacity, the kilowatts. And typically all the other projects we've ever done under policy 115 are all energy related. And that's what we have maxed out on our 5%. Then there's another subset of that that they watch for capacity. So if we're doing any projects, and United was in the same boat with the battery project they've done, Poudre Valley with the battery project they've done, whereby if you have a project that is an energy storage project, well, even capacity related projects. So all the 115 projects have a certain capacity to them. The waste heat recovery generation project that we have has capacity associated with that is coincident with our peak, but most of the other solar projects are not coincident with our peak, so they don't necessarily count to it, which is why we have more headroom under capacity. A project such as this with the school bus, they don't care about the energy. We're still purchasing kilowatt hours to fill the battery. Then we discharge them back into the grid. So that remains neutral. That's not part of it. But the 60 kilowatts of capacity is, and if we added more bus batteries we wanted to create, that's where they'd fall. Now, we're trying to head a different direction with Tri-State. We've engaged with them under different topics. They've got a new person, a new position created at Tri-State that is a little more of an outside of the box thinker, where we're trying to capture the value of this energy storage as a dual benefit, where it can benefit Tri-State and LPEA, trying to set up the framework for that, which is why we did the shortest term possible on this agreement here. And it's just for a period of 5 years.
Well, I guess it brings up the question from a couple questions for me. One of which is, so cutting kind of to the chase, are we going to pay Tri-State through policy 115 for the discharge of that battery in shaving peak?
No, there's no payment that we get to avoid. It's just registering this as a mechanism for us to avoid paying Tri-State. It's all on a net basis, completely net basis. And so it's just a record of it, so to speak.
Okay, so I would think that record is to some financial end under this policy. So if we had 10 of these versus 1, then do we start paying?
No, 10 wouldn't quite do it, but yeah, there is a limitation. Yeah, put enough in there. It's not that we'd start paying it. There's a limitation of 5% of our capacity. So if we're a 140 megawatt utility, I can put 5% of that as a controllable load through these policies. So it's quite a bit. And at that point, if we want to do more, that's where we would utilize the crossover type contracts on something like that. And we have energy storage provisions in there. This is something we needed to do now to be able to take advantage of this asset that we have out there.
So we're anticipating conforming or doing this under policy 115. it's not at this point a big financial, maybe risk might be too strong a word for you, not for me perhaps, but
Right.
but there is some implication, financial implication at some point under policy 115, at some level, but at that level, assuming we're under contract with crossover, we would be able to avoid that through the use of that PPA versus price. Is that accurate? Am I?
Yeah, the risk would be very, very low since we have a lot of room, and this would be like this and maybe a couple more we could put on there here before we have the ability with the crossover type contract. And even better yet, transition this to a DER type program we're trying to stand up with Tri-State so we get credits for the demand aspects of it. With some other, we could have different rate structures with our replacement power supply that demand control doesn't have as much of an impact on. And so we can definitely take advantage of things better on the Tri-State contract through things like this.
All right. And one last question, I'm sorry. If we do, say, a community solar with battery or something like that, and we're anticipating an RFP, haven't seen that. So how does this interrelate with something like that?
Mm-hmm. It would be considered two separate projects. So you'd have it would live under 119, which would be a different policy of Tri-States for the solar garden. And then the energy storage, if we wanted to put something out there, if we didn't have the crossover aspects to work with, that would be a policy 115 if we're playing by the rules that exist today.
Okay. And just, sorry, the way 115 works, we pay and get a credit, right, on energy, right? Is that correct?
We're purchasing the generate. Basically, Tri-State is selling that electricity to us, and then they give us a credit. So yes.
Right. Is that the same basic principle for battery?
No, and it doesn't even have to occur that way with. In fact, it's different with the waste heat recovery project. Tri-State does not charge us for that. We simply avoid paying them. It's on a net basis. That's the way this one is set up as well. There's no payment. We're just avoiding paying Tri-State.
And a meter of some sort, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll send them the metering data and say, here's what happened. And basically nothing occurs on the billing mechanism since they weren't billing it for us. It's just, hey, we're logging it.
Right. So there's not a lot of administrative overhead in this case.
Not at all.
All right. Hey, Dan, thank you and everyone else for sticking with me as I ask these questions.
Okay. Any other questions or comments here? All right. Then right at noon, let's go ahead and take a 30-minute break, and we will see you guys back at 12:30 on schedule. Okay, thank you. See you in a bit. Okay. All right, so let's resume here with the public section of the attorney update from Matt. You should go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice to see all of you. So this is we have a really brief update today. Hopefully that will result in a more robust update here really soon. couple things. We filed our our opening briefs in the reserved issues case at FERC, which relates to how the transmission is assigned between direct assignment and then being rolled up into a full transmission cost. And that was one of the issues that came off of the last rate case. So we filed that. We're working towards another filing next month, and then we'll get a decision from the judge. So that's where that one sits. Our BDP partial settlement, I can tell you that it is very, very close. I'll have a more detailed update in the executive session, but it is very, very close. So I think we're moving along really well there. And then the CTP case is just kind of going towards its hearing. That's going to be a fully litigated case. There's lots going on between depositions of FERC witnesses, depositions of United witnesses, deposition of other entities witnesses. That's all going on. We've largely been in a monitor posture in that case, but that continues to go forward as well. So that's really the update from the perspective of the public update. Happy to take any questions.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, I'm thinking this can be public because it was public at the Tri-State annual meeting or at the membership meeting. What they were saying is we just keep being 3 days away from a buy down payment agreement. Are we still 3 days away from a buy down payment agreement?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
I'll have an update for you in the executive session that'll put a real number of days on that.
Sounds great.
But yes, we've been 3 days away for a very long time. I don't always agree with Tri-State. I would agree with Tri-State on that.
Okay. All right. Absent any other public comments, we are going to need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
And Ted.
Second.
All in favor, hand up and say aye. All opposed. Okay, let's take a minute here and do some quick logistics. How do we want Kohler to handle this executive session?
My preference, John, would be that he not participate. Based on my update, might be able to change that soon.
Okay. And do we have another? This is our only matter in executive session, right?
I was just going to give a brief update on the union contract negotiations.
Which he can join for that, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, so let's get, so if you could communicate with him when you're ready to do that section, and Kohler, you can drop in for the non LP Tri-State stuff. Okay. Great. And everybody want to take a quick moment, make sure you have the link in off your email if anybody doesn't. And Rachel, you had something?
I think that we were just going to get a little bit more detail about the self-generation penalty and kind of what happened there. It's something we needed to do in executive session because it's associated with one account, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's head on over to the other side and we will see you there. Okay, let's go ahead and resume the remainder of the board meeting. There are no action items or resolutions coming out of the executive session. So we will pick this up at director reports, starting with Roundup.
Yeah, I'll do that today, John.
Thanks.
So down on you'll see my short report on page 75 of 123, and then some attachments below that. Let's see, the attachments are the minutes from sort of the two combined meetings we had in February, which was a truncated regular meeting and a board retreat, which we had in February. So those approved minutes are attached, and then also the agenda from the March 21st meeting. not much to point out here, and I'll keep my eye on the 230 prize here. We had a lot of applications because we didn't review any applications in February. So 8 total. We were able to award all 8, although one was truncated to 50% of the ask, and that really was in line with previous asks and grants to that same applicant. Again, I'll point out that every month we continue to dip slightly into the built up reserve that we have in both the Roundup and the educational grant accounts, with the goal of slowly but surely getting those back down to a minimal reserve. So we're putting as much of the organization's money back to work in the community as possible. So beyond that, I take any questions that anybody has, or keep it short. I see Sue, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Ted. I would find it helpful to know which one had been truncated. You know, that I kept looking through the ones that were funded and how much they had asked for, but I couldn't figure out which one didn't get 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that was truncated was a $5,000 ask, and so it was cut in half to $2,500, and it was Music in the Mountains. And we looked back through history, and many of their requests over the course of previous grants were right in that 2,500 range. And so we thought, you know, and also we were going pretty high. You know, we were dipping quite deeply into the reserves, and so that was about half of the reason for truncating one of the 8. Also, just to point out from like just a procedural standpoint, that'll all be obvious in next month's report when you have approved minutes from the March meeting. So, you know, like it's just a point. If you want to look back 2 months in history, you can see a really good record of who was awarded and how much, but certainly don't mind the question on the spot either.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're good, John.
All right, thank you. All right, pushing on, Tri-State.
Thank you. So our Tri-State meeting this month was very short. That was due to the annual meeting and also the membership meeting. The 3 standing committees, other than the executive committee, we didn't have them this month for the same reason. The executive committee meeting did meet, and through that and the regular meeting, we only had 3 action items, which is pretty small for Tri-State. All of those dealt with the E&O committee, so dealing with substations and transformers. In the drive, I included a lot of the presentations that were given at the annual meeting and also the membership meeting. If you get a chance, you should look through them. What I find with these presentations is they have good information, but you really need a repetitive view of these things for it to really grasp on. At least I do. But it kind of gives you an idea, because the theme was you know, driving forward, driving change was the thing. And if you look at Tri-State and you even compare it with some of the other G&Ts throughout the country, they really are driving forward. They're driving that change. They're trying to get ahead of it. They got a lot of programs they're working on to do just that. They do have their challenges. Financially, it's very challenging right now. One of the big key things that came out for all the members, and we had very good attendance at this, was how rough 2021 was. And 2022 is starting off rough too. I mean, our sales are up, but what's really kind of grabbing us is the increase in costs. So like our fuel charge is up 49% for the month of February. And it's going to hurt for quite a while, I think. So with that, what I do is if you look in under Western United, Kirsten put some really detailed, good things in there about the annual meeting and the membership meeting, and I just open up to her if she wants to make some comments now. I'd leave it up for her to do it, and otherwise we'll take questions.
Holly, go ahead.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for that report, Kohler. I really appreciate it. On page 86 of 123, under the Shad Mansour piece, he works for EPRI, which I'm sorry, I don't know what that is, but I see we have access to some of their content through our membership at Tri-State. Anyway, my question is, can you give me just a little bit of high-level information about what the Tri-State new energy as a service program is?
I know I can't go into too much depth because it's just getting started, but what I'm seeing, what's kind of coming a little clear to me, is it's kind of a big scale of what LPA is doing, from DERs to other things like that, trying to get their whole grid, their whole system working together a little bit better, trying to take advantage of the things that they have in this area to where they have disadvantage in another area. And that's about all I can tell you. But I think that it's, in a lot of ways, what I'm seeing, it's a mirror image of what we're doing here at LPA, just much bigger scale. And I think there'll be a lot more to come out here real quick on that, because it just got started 2 months ago. Tim, got something?
Yeah, Kohler, thank you. I got 2 questions. One is, what is Project Ascend?
So Project Ascend, one of the things that Tri-State has to do, and they want to do, is to reduce their cost to the members. And the only way they can do that is reduce their cost to themselves. And Project Ascend is a way to look at how they can cut their costs, be more cost effective. Most of it was in executive session, so I can't share details, but they have hired a consultant to help them out as far as finding areas in which they can be more cost effective and reduce costs. It's a pretty sensitive area that they're doing because it affects jobs, it affects morale. It's been a challenge. But right now, what they've come up with is that they have found about $60 million of sustainable reductions that they can do. That won't happen all in 1 year. It'll be gradual to build up to that. And that's kind of what they're doing. They're working forward to reduce their costs. Obviously, last year in 2021, they had a 2% reduction. This year, they had 2% reduction. And you look at the financials and you go, boy, how are you going to pull that off? And this is what's going to be required to be able to pull it off.
Okay, that's very helpful. Yeah, really helpful. Okay. The other one is, I'm curious about, I saw that the chair of the board and the executive committee were re-elected, and it just kind of brought for me a question of, what's the process? There's these members at large and so forth, and how is it similar to ours? Somebody stood up and said, let's just keep the same ones, everybody voted, or is there some other process that was engaged in that we should be aware of? Like, why weren't you on there, for example?
So the first thing that gets elected is the executive committee, which is basically all of it. And anybody can be nominated. Any member can be nominated for the chair. There was 2 people nominated, and it happened to be Rick Gordon, that was the previous chair, and then Tim, and Rick stepped down. So there wasn't an election there. And throughout that, there was only 2 elections. So there's the chair, the vice chair, there's the treasurer, there's the secretary, there's 2 assistant secretaries, and then there's, I think it's 3 at large. And what's required is that each state has to have a representative on the executive committee, with the exception of New Mexico. And New Mexico gets 2 seats. So as you're starting out at the top, and Tim Raybon is from New Mexico, so that took care of New Mexico. And then as they go down through there, they make sure that they get every state that is covered. And like it mentioned in there, there were no changes. There was a couple names put forward. Most of the names that were put forward for the different ones, they stepped back. They didn't do it. My name was not put forward. So I was not put on And this time with the 3 at large is where your name would get put forward, because the other ones are pretty much long-term folks that are pretty well set there and pretty much kind of predetermined. There wasn't any newer directors that were nominated for those positions.
Okay, thanks. I just realized I had one other question I'd put in here, and that is, can you, maybe you don't have that at hand, it could be an email later, the percentage of WAPA hydro that is in the mix for tri-state, and is there a cost increase in the horizon due to the drought and the lowering of Lake Powell? Do you have any insight or thought on that?
Yes, to both of those. There has been some reduction in what they can provide. And then what they're doing now, I think I have this correct, is the price is determined each month. They used to have kind of a fixed cost, but now they don't. And it's I haven't been updated. Let me do an email, because I can make a quick call and get a better update than what I have now, because we haven't addressed that for probably 3 or 4 months. But it is a big issue. And the predictions was this year was going to be a lot worse than last year, even if we had a good winter. And I don't think the Colorado River Basin had an outstanding. They had, I think, better than us, but not an outstanding one. So more to come on that, and I'll try to get you some other answers.
Thank you, Kohler. Yeah, it doesn't have to be today. It could be an email, in my opinion. Thanks.
Joe?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is Kirsten or Jessica going to talk about this, the rate design committee? Since I've been on the board, this is the first time I've seen something like this. So, and I don't need it now. Obviously, this is a long-term thing, but I would like to get an explanation of that at some point, what a rate design committee does and that sort of thing.
Well, I can give you kind of an overview of it, and they can give you the detail what's going on in it. So the rate committee, what has been referred to in the past, is one person from each co-op gets to be represented on that. And what they did is they came up with, what is their tariff? What are they going to do for the rate? That's how we got the rates we had today, is it's been put forward by the rate committee. Then you make recommendations to the board and the board approves it. Now it's called the Rate Design Committee. And we have until September of 2023 to submit to FERC our rate. So the rate that we have in place right at the moment, when I say we, tri-state, that is in effect until September 2023. And then we have to submit a rate. And there's a lot of questions on what that rate would be. And I'll again let Kirsten and Jessica kind of tie into that, if it should be a formulaic rate or just a standard rate. And that's the homework that they're doing. So each co-op has a person on that committee. Right now they're meeting once a month. And it's usually half of one day and then the other half the next day. So the afternoon and then the morning. Today it's all day today. And that's where Dan is. So I see Kirsten has her hand up. So maybe Kirsten, you want to add something to that?
And Kirsten, if you could say, I don't know what a formulaic rate is, if you could just give it.
Okay, sure. So thanks for that explanation, Kohler. You had it just right. The first couple months has been mostly an education thing of figuring out, okay, what are rates? What do other people do? Today was basically looking at the A40 rate, the current rate, and saying, is this a good starting point? Is this the way it's designed? Is this where we want to start and then make changes from this, or do we want to throw it all out and start from scratch? And it'll be interesting to see where we go on that. I was on for the first hour, and I think it's a really good discussion and important discussion. The difference between a stated rate and a formulaic rate is a stated rate says, okay, we're going to charge 7.9 cents for everybody all the time, and there's going to be there's a demand charge and such. A formulaic rate says That's what it's going to cost, but these are the things that feed into that. So if these things change, then that rate will change. So halfway through the year, you can do a rate change. If you're on formulaic, halfway through the year, you can do okay, guys, we're not collecting enough because our fuel price has gone up, so we're going to change the rate for the rest of the year. Whereas with a stated rate, you generally have to do a at the end of the year, you do a true up. Yeah, you do a true up, and then you end up paying that for the next year. So formulaic has a little more movement in it, or can have a little more movement in it, and it pays more attention to some of the underlying things about it. And a stated rate is, this is the rate, and it's going to be the rate until we tell you FERC that it's going to be something else, or that we ask you for it to be something else. So it can get kind of out of whack after a few years. That was it about the RDC. Jessica, you got anything to add?
No, I would just echo what Kirsten said, is it's just been a lot of getting people up to speed on what a rate is in reality. While, you know, Kirsten and I have a lot of experience on it, so it's been a little bit painful. But I think that the real decision is coming down towards, are we going to stay with the current rate of the A40 with some modifications, or go to a formulaic rate, which requires a true up every year? And Kirsten, your question this morning, I mean, really what it is what they do is every quarter, because Bonneville does this in the Northwest, they have a formulaic rate. So you know the inputs, but if the cost of power increase during those quarterly months, then they have an opportunity to actually create a surcharge. So what a formulaic rate process would result in is that Tri-State could look at those 4 months of expenses and then say, well, we actually had to pay more in power rates than we thought we did. So now we are going to raise rates for all customers by 1% to collect that. And then they'd come back 4 months later, or maybe this is 2 times a year, but it's a true up. That's basically what it is. And that's why FERC likes that. FERC goes towards formulaic rates. So I'll be really curious how FERC decides if they like this A40 modified rate, or if they'll tell FERC Tri-State to go back and do a formulaic rate.
And from a Tri-State point of view, there's also, you know, some advantages of doing a formulaic rate as well, because once you get the rate, or the formula approved, then it's approved. And when they make these changes and these true ups, that doesn't have to go to FERC and get approved. Whereas if you have the other rate, every time you change it, it has to go in front of FERC and get approved. And that's very, very expensive and very time consuming. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And I think that's what they're learning now is, okay, what way to go. And it's pretty interesting when you listen to this committee, because you really get to see the difference between the big co-ops and the small co-ops. It really, really kind of popped out. So.
Yeah, and that's really where the rub is, because when you look at the numbers at Tri-State and the numbers on this board, so there's 42 folks, and a lot of them come from small co-ops, very different needs than some of the larger co-ops, and it is going to be a majority rules. One of the things that Tri-State has really been emphasizing during this time is, if we want to get this rate through FERC, it really has to be unopposed. So we have to have agreement. This can't go with just a simple majority, that it's got to be, I think it's really setting a fire underneath people's underneath people to really come together on this. And we're seeing that. The caliber of the folks who are on this committee is really great. And the questions we're hearing, and not only the experience, but also the willingness to really kind of dive into something. I think it's one of the better of the Tri-State committees I've ever seen.
Do you have a deadline, or I mean, we won't have to deal with this until the next year's budget, I guess?
September 2023, as Kohler said, is when we have to file the comeback rate with FERC. So it's got to go really June. It's going to be having to go to the Tri-State board so it can work its way through, so it can get up. Now that comeback rate does not have to be the permanent rate. We have to have it filed by September 2023, but we could say, okay, we're still working on how to make this into a formulary rate. Let's keep working on that, and that could happen in October or November. It could happen later on. So there is one drop dead deadline, but it's not drop dead for the entire process. Does that sound right? Okay.
It does
Yeah.
have a little more flavor on a committee. I think 50% of the committee is CEOs. So you do have quite a powerful committee there with a lot of different input and uptakes. All right, that's all I have then, John.
Okay, thank you, sir. Fast track.
Yeah, I think not a lot additional to report outside of the written report I submitted. I will mention that Kelly indicated she had some good meetings with staff between the two LPEA and Fast Track, and including her and Jessica, and she was complimentary and I think quite positive about that, and very consistent with what Jessica indicated to me was her impression of that same set of meetings. So I'll take any questions if anyone has any. Joe?
Yeah, just for the future, you know, I noted that they got the El La Vida subdivision all wired up with fiber, I guess. At some point, it would be cool to hear, you know, how that's going and how difficult it was and expensive and et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of a little report on that project, since everybody in the world wants fiber to their home. So.
Sure, I'll do that. It's just a conduit that's been installed. They haven't run the fiber yet. So the conduit is, you know, that's the expensive piece to get into all that rock over there. So, but I will keep that in mind and give more info as it develops. Kirsten?
Yeah, so this is tangentially related to Fast Track, and CDOT is now starting to lay that fiber from the top of Oak Creek Pass down to Pagosa. It was stalled for 1.5 years because of they just ran out of the money for that current year. So still glad to see that that's getting in the ground. It's been parked behind my veterinarian for 1.5 years now, that fiber.
Yeah, you know, my understanding is that that is funded by one fiber company, and Fast Track has been trying to have discussions with them about leasing dark fiber and so forth on that, but I don't believe progress has been made. So it could be that this is only one company that will use it, and you know, how it might pan out in terms of increased bandwidth for homes in Pagosa, I think is still an open question a little bit. So, you know, anyway, that's my understanding at this point. I'll try and get more info as it comes along. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, CREA.
All right, great, thank you. So in the board packet this month, there is a CREA monthly regularly scheduled board meeting write-up that Joe, thank you, Joe, did put together for me. I did also forward the CREA legislation list that they're currently following and the current updates, but I don't have a made discourse on that particular item. The next CREA board meeting is next Friday. Does anybody have any? Kirsten?
Yeah, two things. The Guatemala trip, organizing the Guatemala trip. I think this last week I sent to the board a thing about the some folks putting some electricity in some of the rural Navajo Nation in Utah. And I know CRA keeps looking to South and Central America for their projects. Can you please give some little shoves for some closer to our backyard projects?
Yes, ma'am. That actually really does interest me as well. And I can tell you from every single thing that I have ever read about the folks that do participate in that South America electrification program, that it really does change their lives. They are exposed to things that they might not see on a regular basis. They are helping people that don't have that. And I agree, it would be great to apply some of those same ideas to our direct neighbors. I had an opportunity to mention it briefly to somebody who's been in this realm much longer than I have. And some of it boils down to a historical distrust of what the intentions are. So when you also, and this is my personal opinion, when you read the NRECA policies towards that, it was interesting because when I first did it last year for the NRECA, direction, the proposals that they put forth for their business meeting every year. Right. That, right at the very beginning, they had something in support of that international program that we go through to Guatemala and whatnot. And it was really inspirational. I was like, oh yeah, this is great stuff for supporting cooperative principles and, all kinds. And I also knew that people's lives get changed participating in this program. But when you go through and you read through the NRECA programs, you get to the one specifically regarding Native American reservations. And it is so just direct, like we want to work with state entities to, I'm paraphrasing in my own personal bias, to get them to do what we want them to do, basically. So that was one of the areas that I was really, because I know that some of our board members do have connections with the Navajo Nation. We have the Utes within our territory. We in Archuleta County work a lot with the Hickory Apache. So that was something that really hit my radar, to tell you the truth. And so there's no easy solutions on that. Currently, they did opt to put forth and find the money to participate this year in that program, because the thought is that Oklahoma is spearheading it. And apparently they have a whole statewide organization that is specifically geared towards organizing their work in these international programs. And so they did not want to lose the Colorado spot to work with Oklahoma and more or less ride their coattails. So that was a whole lot of information.
Okay, it was. Thank you, Holly. I appreciate that. So you're on it. That there's some interest from some folks of maybe some more backyard stuff. And I appreciate you taking that message forward, and the politics of it, I know, can be overwhelming. Thank you for that. My second question is actually more towards Joe. Joe, I know you attended this, but you didn't put any per diem in, and CREA doesn't pay for your time. We pay for your time. Did you mean to?
It was such an outlier. I just kind of forgot about it. And then I was doing that right now, if that's okay. Sorry about that. 2 half days.
Okay, super. And that is something to keep in mind. So so CREA doesn't pay for their directors. Western United does pay their directors a per diem. Tri-State pays their directors a per diem. Western United doesn't pay for you to go to the annual meeting, but that's weird. So it's various things for various folks. So I just want you to know. So when you see stuff come in from Holly, or in this case from Joe, it's because they're doing work for those bigger boards, and they're not getting paid for it by those other boards.
Correct. All right, Kohler.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to your comments, Holly, about doing these projects more local, because I serve on the CEEI board, which is the Colorado Electric Educational Institute, which is a kind of a subset of CREA. And it was either 2 or 3 years ago, we tried to do a project on the Navajo Nation, and the Navajo Nation did not want it. And it's probably for the very reasons that you were talking about. So we have tried to reach out and kind of do some of those things, but I don't exactly understand the roadblocks, but there are roadblocks. I just thought I'd add that to what you were saying.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, this might be for Joe, I'm not sure, or you. It's in Joe's report that there's a CREA member engagement meeting supposedly in Durango on August 3rd. And it said a presentation made to the board. I assume that's the LPA board. And if that is the case, that's currently not on any schedule. And I think we should get that schedules. It's not on, August 3rd is not one of our regular board meetings or anything. So I'm just pointing out there's some logistical things there that would be helpful for me. That's not very far away, frankly. So.
Yeah, I think that Liz is the organizer on this. And so she's gonna have to send out the invitations, but it's a CRE manager and joint board meeting. And so I don't know what CREA does in regards to inviting our entire board to those. That'll be up to Liz. So we'll talk to Liz. I know that they're still trying to figure out the meeting schedule and the timeline. I'm trying to look at what I have. And there's still, yeah, I don't have the agenda for it. So we'll circle back with Liz at CREA, but they're the ones that lead these meetings. And there are certain times where they invite the rest of the LPA board, but it's not for, I don't know if it's for the full board meeting. Holly, do you know?
My experience, Tim, they did have one last, I want to say it was August, maybe okay, and this, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a total blank. It was one of the cooperatives that's based out of just west of Rocky Mountain National Park. They had bad fires last year. Okay. Sorry, I am drawing a blank on who it was. And so basically, yeah, thank you. So basically what they did was they had a couple of their board members in there just talking about aspects of the cooperative. They had their CEO talk about it. We all got a nifty travel mug that says the cooperative name on it. You know, there was no, as far as I know, from my perspective, no invitation specifically that I know of that went out to that board, but it could very well have happened and I just don't know. Kirsten?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity though for us to step up and beyond and be good hosts. So I get it's a CREA thing, but it's us, you know, it's time for us to show off. It's time for us to rub elbows. And so I would like us to kind of take it on separately not separately, but in conjunction with CREA and those of us who can get it on our schedule, get it on our schedules, and of course, get everybody on the bus and, you know, those kinds of things. So I would love, I think us as a board should do something, and I don't know how to get that going.
Yeah, this is, again, I just want to reiterate, this is CREA. They really dictate because we've tried and asked. But Kirsten, I'm looking at the agenda on, this is a draft agenda that I recently received, and she will be sending out invites to the LPA board to attend the meeting on August 3rd. So I would, to Tim's point, it's from 7:30 to noon on Wednesday the 3rd. I'll ask her when she's sending out the invitations. And then there's an orientation of CREA from 1:30 to 4:30 that same day. So
See, Jessica's got more information than I do, so thank you for that.
So I'll double back with Liz because I even wanted to bring in speakers and I was told I couldn't. So I think this is just something that they do as a service, and like I've asked about setting up other events for them, and I'll keep pushing. But it does look like she's intending to invite the board to the 3rd. So I will ask her to send out those invitations promptly.
And we can crash the other pieces, right?
No, because it's a manager's meeting and no board members are invited to those. Because it's a manager's meeting and then a CREA board meeting. And so she is opening the invitation to the board meeting component of it.
Okay. Fine.
I tried.
No, I appreciate that.
And I would acknowledge when this first came up a couple months ago, Tim was excited then too. So thank you for your enthusiasm. I do appreciate that from you guys. Anybody else have a question or a comment? All right, I really appreciate it. And I am glad that I have another 3 years to work with you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Holly. Okay, last bit, Western United.
Yeah, so it's gonna be actually Western United Plus, because there's a few other things to hit. So Western United do not have a meeting in March. We've got one April 28th. It's gonna be about budget. I did attach our financials for March, along with a note from Greg. I don't know if you recall, but last month I was talking about the lead times, and that's a note that Jessica had sent out. The lead times have been so long and are getting longer, and we're building inventory to try to take care of that. And LPEA saw the writing on the wall too, and has done a great job with their inventory. The other thing that we're seeing now is with the inflation, we're not able to get firm quotes from our vendors. So we're not able to tell you how much something is going to cost until it gets delivered, because we just basically pass it on with our itty bitty little bit of a margin. So it's getting to be a real pain between the long lead times and then the cost going up and the cost kind of being quasi unknown. It's a tough time for everybody. So I just really wanted to let everybody know that. And this isn't a surprise. I mean, the Western United's been really good. They talk to their folks all the time, and Jessica's on top of this, so we're good with that. But it's a real pain. I did want to, any questions about Western United? Okay, I did after the Western United. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
That's all right. I'm curious, when's their fiscal year end?
We're on a June. We're June. So end of June. June 30th is the end of the year. July 1 starts it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we're halfway through. So if you look at our year to date, we're almost 3/4. We're more than 3/4 of the way through our year. Anything else on Western United? Okay, I do on page 109. I've got a couple of pages about the RDC, which is good. I do want to point out a couple watch outs that I have. One is Tim Woolley. He's the senior manager, assistant, and general counsel, and he's kind of helping be the staff lead on this. He noted that Tri-State might have partial requirements members in the future, and that may introduce the need for 2 classes of members. My concern about that is that some folks might think that's going to be an opportunity to try to gouge that class. I don't think that's going to get through, but it's something that we need to keep our ear to the ground on, because it could come up. You know, if we are a different kind of member, then they might be able to try to treat us differently. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I know staff doesn't want to do that, but this is a board decision. So we have to be aware of the whole board on that one. And then after that, I do talk about on page 112, a few pages, and Kohler spoke up on most of these. I did want to highlight one thing. Electric Power Research Institute, that's EPRI. That's what Arshad Mansour is. And if you have a chance to listen to him speak, he's very good. And I actually put in a link for something that he did for somebody else. And it's pretty much, it's kind of his 2022 talking points. So I think you'll get the kind of what we got, but it's even though he's talking to somebody else. In general, so where I can add a little bit of color is kind of the hallway talk. So in addition to all the, the meetings and the presentations and the steak dinner and stuff, the chance to talk to folks was great. I got a lot of questions about crossover. I wasn't in a place and didn't want to be answering a lot of questions about crossover. A lot of questions were, what if any oversight, so they're not going to be regulated by FERC, who's going to be their oversight? And also if we go into an RTO, what does that play. So I was able to say very positive things about crossover, about their financials and such. But I didn't get down to anything on that because I didn't think that was my role. In general, I think folks at the other tri-state directors and the other members seemed really positive about the partial contract and pleased with the way it's going. And they really enjoy the way that LPEA is working with tri-state. So there was a lot of goodwill there about that. And a lot of folks are holding their breath about the contract termination payment. And this has to do with that, that kind of one-off that came out of that one FERC employee. So it'll be interesting to see if that ever comes to fruition, because he came in with such a low number that everybody's really freaking out about that. And I believe, oh, and then I have one more thing I wanted to add, and that is, you know, Tim, you'd asked about Kohler being on the executive committee. One thing we need to be really careful about getting anybody on that executive committee, because once we have somebody on that executive committee, it really muzzles that person. I don't know if you recall, but we had for years somebody on that executive committee, and in Joe, the ranch guy. Yeah, Joe.
Wheeling.
Pardon me?
Joe Wheeling.
Yes, thank you very much. Joe Wheeling, and his hands were pretty much tied, and basically the agreement that was signed was so, in order to allow him to be functional on that executive committee, was so onerous that I think unless we were able to get somebody on that committee without having to sign that, we would be crazy. I was nominated to be on that committee 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and I turned it down because I wouldn't think about being on that committee without first having a long discussion with Graham and the rest of you guys. So if it's something we want to think about, you know, and if we want Kohler or whoever the representative is to be
2024
on that
won't
committee,
matter, will it?
It won't. It won't.
Because we will not be a voting member of the board.
We won't be on the board, exactly.
Well,
We
yeah,
could be the last
a
6
voting
months.
member, anyway.
Yeah. And that's it for my reports. Read them, they're good. I won't go into the detail. Anything else?
Kirsten, I actually just had one comment on page 110, and this is on the rate committee. Well, I have a question first. You've got a bunch of bullet points: optimization, risk, stability, equity, and opportunity. Did you write those definitions, or was that something you copied?
That comes directly out of Tri-State Board Policy 503.
Okay, thank you for that. I wrote down in my notes when I was reading everything, one statement that you made in your report, and it is right above those bullet points, and it says, "It was clear in the discussion that the smaller co-ops are concerned about their inability to afford technology that may reduce their cost." And I think that's really vitally important, because I think that that's a lot of a driver of the challenges that we have going forward, and why relationship building is ultra important going forward, you know, to help address and alleviate some of those concerns to affect better outcomes for all of us. And so I just, you know, that, you know, the cooperative principles dictate that we work on our own stuff and we're autonomous, but it also says that there's cooperation among cooperatives. And so since LPEA is in one of those leading positions where we're doing some of the more innovative stuff, then a lot of them, you know, it's kind of, whether it's fair or not, going to fall to us to continue to answer those questions and to help a lot of these folks be able to move forward into the future. So that's just something that I wanted to acknowledge, that comment that you made and how it plays into a lot of the themes we talked about today.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, I always love that you include the kind of between the lines dynamics pieces that are going on. So thanks for doing that. I remember that in your tri-state reports. I appreciate it here because just as Holly was saying, it's critical. And then it's interesting you bring that up, Holly. I'm wondering, right, CREA with some of their educational efforts, if that's really a core theme coming out of co-ops, if there's any sort of financial coaching or cost benefit analysis. I don't know. We don't need to talk about that, but just random side comment.
Okay. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, one comment on what Kirsten just reported. I really appreciated your rate design committee write-up. I thought that was really good. It was really clear and helpful. So thank you for that, Kirsten. But I also had a couple questions that aren't really on this agenda. Is this an appropriate time to ask about them? Well, sort of, they're on this agenda. So one of them has to do with, my understanding was we were going to review the 300 series of policies at this board meeting, and it didn't show up on the agenda at all. I'm just curious, is that something that we're going to see next month, or what's the story behind that?
Yeah, just quick answer to that, Tim. We pushed all of that based on the perception that we were going to be extremely busy going through the election cycle. Like staff was going to be busy. I super apologize if I didn't get that sort of bump notice out to everybody. I thought I did. So we have a committee meeting scheduled for the 27th, and we'll make it clear what that schedule is going forward after that meeting.
Okay, yeah, it's not a complaint. I was just wondering what was going on there. The other is at the very end of my page 123 of 123 is the principal consultant and contractor report. I'm not sure why it's at the end here, but that to me, that's a really helpful review. I like that. And I know that we spend a tremendous amount of money. Some of this is not in expense budget directly. It's through capital projects and so forth. And I've asked before, and I want to just remind staff or whoever that I think we need a review of how we actually contract with contractors and how we arrive at the selection, and how do we, maybe a better board understanding of that, as well as how it gets reviewed on a periodic basis. I mean, I've had constituents say, how do I get a contract with LPEA? And I can't answer them, for example, right? Other than to say, call Jessica or somebody like that. So, and maybe that's the right response, I don't know. But it just seems to me that this is very impactful money that our members spend, and then how do we bring that back into our community through contracting? And we do spend a lot of money here. So I find this, this is an opportunity and maybe a risk at both, but I would like us to have some better understanding. And, is there a policy or some other thing that's needed here, or what should be the structure? And maybe it's okay the way it is, but I don't fully understand it, and I can't explain it to my constituents very well. And I would like to be able to do that and see if there's room for improvement, and what are our goals with regards to our strategic initiative about, local economic development, and how does this play into it?
So Tim, we do have quite a few internal policies on contractor selection and things of that nature, and I'd be happy to put together a memo for the board to try and explain that to everyone, what the existing policies are and all of that. And I've made a note of that. I'll try and get that for everyone, and I'm sure you're probably not the only director who gets questions on this, so it makes sense that it is a good educational opportunity for you directors, as it's likely, you get these questions not infrequently.
That would be really helpful. Thanks, Graham.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question on when's our lunch meeting with Dan? I got the email from Janelle, but there was no date on it, and it just had that meeting ICE and nothing showing up on my calendar. On my phone, I can't download them on my phone.
Shows April 25th at noon. Janelle, and so Janelle, can you resend that invitation?
It's in the title. I think that's where some people miss it. It's in the title of the subject line of the email.
Okay, Sue, I'm sorry.
Thanks. Mine too was with the lunch and learn. You know, unfortunately, because of the late notice, I already have other plans for Monday that, again, I cannot change. So knowing well ahead of time is very helpful if we're going to have the lunch and learns, or, you know, like with the green power presentation, I didn't know anything about it till after the fact. So I guess my request would be that we as the board get that information sooner. If staff's going to be doing a presentation somewhere, that we know about it, like where it's going to be, when it's going to happen. Doesn't mean we can always attend, but if we can, I think most of us would like to do that. And then to maybe plan farther out on the lunch and learns, just so that we can make sure we have time to put those on our calendar. Kind of like to Tim's point with the August 3rd meeting with CREA, you know, if we waited till like July 25th to put it on our calendar, probably most of us could not attend. So the more notice we have, I think would be really helpful and appreciated. Thanks.
And we'll video the lunch and learn that Dan gives. And then, but we'll work on that. So I agree, this lunch and learn came at a quick notice. And honestly, Dan's presentation, you know, we rely on those organizations to do the outreach. And so I think that was just our assumption, is that most of the board members are on those emails, and we'll make sure that we cover that in the future.
Thank you. And I would like a copy of that recording. I did see that if it was going to be recorded. Yep. So I'd love to have that.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Kirsten.
Yeah, I would like to understand the criteria for when we get to start having in-person board meetings.
I don't think anybody on this call has an answer to that question.
Can I suggest that we follow the San Juan Basin Public Health, who follows the CDC, and we are currently in low in both Archuleta County and in La Plata County. And if we follow theirs, that perhaps when we're in low, we can go to in-person and hybrid. And we're in medium or high, we would go back to virtual only. Would that work for folks? And I don't know legally or anything what things are, but just so that we can
okay. So look, I think your sentiment, your strongly held desire to get back in person is shared by more than one person on this board. So rather than making an off the cuff decision, why don't I take the point of circling back up with Graham and Jessica, and just make sure all our I's and our T's are crossed and dotted, so that we can move forward.
Thanks.
But I think your suggestion has merit, and if not, if we're not anchoring off of San Juan, let's anchor off of somebody else who has sort of a bigger scope than we do.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. Rachel.
Yeah, am I correct that next month is elections and appointments for officers and representatives?
Yes. Yeah. So once all of our officer and other appointments are up at the next meeting after the membership election, which would take place at the beginning of next month. So yes, that will be at the May meeting.
Is there, I just don't know where, if I send this in an email as a request, but maybe just, John, would you be willing to sit down with me and brainstorm a way to run, not the election itself and the voting, that's probably in policy, but maybe just a little bit more discussion at the onset so that if there are multiple people running for a position, we kind of can think about it a little more strategically and based on people's kind of skills and interests. I feel like sometimes we just throw a name out there and off we go.
Yeah, I think that's yes, of course, I'd love to meet with you in general and in this particular matter. But I think again, let's do that next week, and we'll take that conversation offline. But I think again, reading into your comment a little bit, I think maybe we can do a sort of an organizing email to the board that gives everybody a heads up that says, hey, the elections are coming up. And this is, and a little more context about how we do it. Is that, or am I missing the mark a little?
I think you got it.
Okay. So I'll take that and pull together an organizing email so at least people have clarity on the facts of what happens and what the expectation is. And then you and I can have a separate conversation one-on-one. Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Anybody else? I just got called out for yawning. I would like to say my coffee has worn off. It's not that I'm not listening. All right. Anything else?
So the annual meeting is the 12th. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't get my hand up. The annual meeting is the 12th, right? At the bus barn?
Yes, and we will send out the agenda shortly. We're just finalizing the details of it. And then we'll send it out.
That's the time we eat together. And that is in person to that point too.
It's in person and virtual. We're doing a hybrid.
Yeah.
And Monday is Zoom, right?
Repeat that.
Monday's lunch and learn is Zoom, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, any other items on or sort of organizing comments? The agenda is effectively over. So if we have any other comments or closing remarks, this would be your moment. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, I cannot be at the annual meeting on the 12th. I'll be driving to my daughter's law school graduation. So
Nice.
That probably will prevent me from participating materially in the FAC earlier than day as well. So I apologize for that. I apologize to the members as well for not being there. But I don't think there's any substantive action that's needed there at the annual meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it's a membership meeting, so there isn't any particularized board role other than President Witchell's obligation to sort of MC the event, as it were.
Will there be a treasurer or other kind of report for those kinds of things? And will it all be recorded?
Yes, it will be recorded in the hybrid format. I think, historically, we've allowed the treasurer to delegate the treasurer's report to the chief financial officer, vice president of finance. I believe that the treasurer's report will be in a delegated format, and Carl will actually do that presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, Tim, I want to point out that Bob risked being late to his daughter's wedding for the last FAC. So your daughter's law school thing and maybe missing a FAC just doesn't hold much water.
Yep, but I don't want her to sue me.
You know what? Oh,
Okay. All right. Anybody, any other last comments here? Otherwise, going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you guys for getting Kirsten and Jessica out of here 15 minutes early. And I will follow up on my items in email and appreciate it. But the meeting is now adjourned.
Great. Thank you.
Adios. Thanks all.